I showed my husband a silly joke. He got angry and left. Then I found out he'd been cheating on me for a long time. Hi everyone. I usually just scroll through Instagram, so this is my first time posting here. Honestly, I never thought I'd be the one writing something like this, especially since my husband, 30 male, and me, 27 female, always had what I thought was a perfect marriage. Sure, we had small arguments like everyone else, but overall, everything seemed great. We got married in April 2021, and life since then had been smooth, until a few days ago. That afternoon, we came home from a lunch with some friends, let's call them Kai and Marie, who recently got engaged. It was just a casual lunch, nothing dramatic. We even brought home some amazing pasta, which I'm eating right now because it's too cold for ice cream. We live in a tiny apartment. My husband went to shower first while I cleaned up the leftovers. When it was my turn, I showered, and afterward I squeezed out too much lotion. I rubbed it in, but there was still some left on my fingers, so I did what any totally reasonable adult would do. I drew a smiley face with little hair on my thumb. I proudly walked out of the bathroom giggling and said, "Look, it's the lotion man!" He didn't laugh. He just stared at my hand and blinked. I kept joking around, talking in a silly voice, saying random nonsense, trying to make him smile. But after a minute or two, he just stood up and walked out. I thought he was still joking, so I laughed and asked where he was going, but he grabbed his truck keys and left. He always keeps his pickup stocked after road trips, clothes, snacks, everything, so it didn't immediately hit me that he was really leaving. When I finally realized, I felt like the biggest idiot alive. I texted him several times. He replied once, saying he needed to think things over and that he was staying with his brother, Tyler. Since then, he hasn't answered or even read my messages. His brother isn't replying either. I've just been sitting here, staring at the door, replaying everything over and over. We've been together for years. I've always been a little goofy, it's part of who I am, and he's always found it cute. Now I feel like an idiot for making that stupid lotion man joke and not realizing something was off. He's never left the house like that before, even during hard times. I'm trying to give him space, but I can't stop overthinking. Divorce sounds like a nightmare. I keep asking myself, was my dumb little lotion joke really that bad? How do I even begin to fix this? Update 1. I followed your advice and gave him space. Reading your comments made me question how accurate my idea of our perfect marriage really was. I still believe we were good together, but maybe I missed something. Anyway, some of you were right. It wasn't really about the lotion man, but you were also partly wrong. Something did happen during that lunch with our friends. My husband came back a couple of days ago. He apologized and said he wanted to talk. I agreed. I missed him so much, even though I tried not to show it. He told me the whole story. So we had lunch with our friends, Kai, 30 male, and Marie, 29 female. They'd just gotten engaged. It was a buffet-style restaurant, so people kept getting up for food. At some point, my husband and Marie went together, or maybe it was near the end. I remember chatting with Kai alone for a while before they came back. Either way, they were alone briefly. Marie apparently confessed to my husband that when Kai proposed, she realized she was actually in love with him. But she still said yes to Kai and tried to suppress her feelings. That's why she invited us to lunch, as some kind of closure. But instead of closure, she told my husband she wanted to run away with him. Marie is annoyingly gorgeous, blonde, blue-eyed, tall, and thin like a runway model. Think Emma Watson, but colder. I hate how much that bothers me. My husband said he politely turned her down and wished her well, but admitted that her confession messed with his head. We all went to college together, so we've known each other for years. When I came out of the shower later that day, laughing with a towel on my head and making silly jokes with the lotion man, he said something in him just snapped. According to him, my immaturity in that moment clashed with how mature and graceful Marie had seemed. It triggered some sort of emotional panic about our marriage, so he ran off to his brother's place. He claims that after a few days apart, he realized how much he loved me and came home. I just stared at him in disbelief. I asked a few questions, then told him to sleep on the couch for the night. He agreed. I didn't sleep at all. I still can't believe he almost threw away our marriage over some emotional fantasy with a woman who's engaged. The more I think about it, the harder it is to even look at him. We've since had Thanksgiving dinner with his family and even spent a night together again. I think he believes everything is fine now, and honestly, part of me wants to forgive and move on, just to feel normal again. But I don't know what to do next. He'll be home from work in about 6 hours. I'm a teacher, so I have the day off, and my brain's been spinning with options all morning. A. Tell Kai what his fiancée did. My husband begged me not to, saying Marie just had a moment of weakness. B. Contact Marie directly, either to confront her or to have a calm talk, though that sounds unlikely. C. Call Tyler, my husband's brother, and ask if my husband ever really stayed with him. His house is uncomfortably close to Marie's, and that makes me nervous. Or D. Do all of the above. I honestly don't know what I'll do yet. I showed my husband a silly joke. He got angry, walked out, and never came back. Turns out he'd been cheating on me for a long time. Hi everyone, I usually just scroll through Instagram, so this is my first time posting here. Honestly, I never thought I'd be the one writing something like this, especially since my husband, 30 male, and me, 27 female, always had what I thought was a perfect marriage. Sure, we had small arguments like everyone else, but overall, everything seemed great. We got married in April 2021, and life since then had been smooth, until a few days ago. That afternoon, we came home from a lunch with some friends. Let's call them Kai and Marie, who recently got engaged. It was just a casual lunch, nothing dramatic. We even brought home some amazing pasta, which I'm eating right now because it's too cold for ice cream. We live in a tiny apartment. My husband went to shower first while I cleaned up the leftovers. When it was my turn, I showered, and afterward, I squeezed out too much lotion. I rubbed it in, but there was still some left on my fingers, so I did what any totally reasonable adult would do. I drew a smiley face with little hair on my thumb. I proudly walked out of the bathroom giggling and said, "Look, it's the lotion man!" He didn't laugh. He just stared at my hand and blinked. I kept joking around, talking in a silly voice, saying random nonsense, trying to make him smile. But after a minute or two, he just stood up and walked out. I thought he was still joking, so I laughed and asked where he was going. But he grabbed his truck keys and left. He always keeps his pickup stocked after road trips, clothes, snacks, everything, so it didn't immediately hit me that he was really leaving. When I finally realized, I felt like the biggest idiot alive. I texted him several times. He replied once, saying he needed to think things over and that he was staying with his brother, Tyler. Since then, he hasn't answered or even read my messages. His brother isn't replying either. I've just been sitting here, staring at the door, replaying everything over and over. We've been together for years. I've always been a little goofy, it's part of who I am, and he's always found it cute. Now I feel like an idiot for making that stupid lotion man joke and not realizing something was off. He's never left the house like that before, even during hard times. I'm trying to give him space, but I can't stop overthinking. Divorce sounds like a nightmare. I keep asking myself, was my dumb little lotion joke really that bad? How do I even begin to fix this?
First update. I followed the advice people gave me and gave him space, but reading everyone's comments made me think, maybe our perfect marriage wasn't as perfect as I believed. And turns out you were right about something happening during that lunch. My husband came back a couple of days later, apologized, and said he wanted to talk. He told me that while I was chatting with Kai, Marie had confessed to him that she was in love with him and had been since college. She said she'd accepted Kai's proposal hoping the feelings would fade, but seeing my husband again brought everything back. She even asked him to leave me for her. He said he turned her down and wished her well, but he admitted that the confession messed with his head, that he started comparing us. Marie was beautiful, confident, and composed. Meanwhile, I'd been goofing around in a towel, laughing about a lotion face. He said it made him suddenly question our whole relationship, and that's why he panicked and left. I was speechless. He said he realized how stupid it was and that he still loved me. I told him to sleep on the couch. Since then, he's been acting like everything's fine again, but I can't unhear what he said, that another woman's confession made him doubt me. I don't know if I can ever look at him the same way. He thinks we can just move on, but I'm torn. Part of me still loves him. Another part wants to scream. I've been thinking about telling Kai what Marie did, but my husband begged me not to, saying she just made a mistake. I'm not sure I believe that. Second update. Thank you all so much for the love and support. Seriously, I didn't expect such kindness. My last post was deleted, but here's what happened since. I took your advice. I talked to everyone involved, Kai, Marie, my husband, and Tyler. What I found out completely shattered me. When I met with Kai, I told him everything I knew. He was skeptical at first, then broke down crying. Turns out Marie had told him nothing. Together, we went to confront her. At first, she denied everything. Then she snapped. The truth came out, and it was so much worse than I imagined. My husband wasn't innocent. He was the one who'd started everything. He had suggested to Marie that before she officially married Kai, the three of them, him, Marie, and another woman, should spend a night together, and Marie had agreed. Apparently, this wasn't new. She'd been cheating on Kai for years, with both men and women, and my husband had been cheating on me just as long. They covered for each other. Marie said she backed out of that threesome idea at the last minute because she wanted to be faithful now that she was engaged. My husband got angry, and not long after, I showed him the lotion man. He snapped, left, and ran off. Later, I spoke with Tyler. He said my husband came over around 11 p.m. and left at 8 a.m., meaning there were about 3 unaccounted hours. He guessed my husband might have just driven around to clear his head, but that didn't sound like him. That night, when my husband fell asleep early, I went through his phone. At first, nothing. Then I found a hidden folder, and there they were, dozens of nudes. Not mine, not Marie's either, from another woman. Let's call her Allison. Stunning redhead, hourglass figure. Their messages went back to February, right before Valentine's Day, when I was planning a surprise for him. She didn't even know he was married until recently. When she found out, she was furious. And here's the part that made me sick. My husband told her he would bring me to a hotel to prove that I was okay with their affair. Sound familiar? It was the same idea he'd pitched to Marie. After that, I couldn't even pretend anymore. The next morning, I packed my things. He cried, begged, swore he loved only me, blamed his weakness for redheads, said I was the only one that mattered. I told him it was over. The apartment's in his name, so I left. Right now, I'm staying with Kai. He's heartbroken too. We both are. I don't know what comes next. Divorce, therapy, or just trying to survive this. But at least now I know the truth. His fiancée meant everything to him. We sat together for a long time, hugging, crying, saying all kinds of nonsense, just trying to hold ourselves together. He tried to cheer me up and made lunch. It turned out great. He's an amazing cook. I showed him my 2 previous posts, and he laughed at some of your comments. As far as I know, my almost ex-husband is now with Marie. I don't care about them. Honestly, it even feels kind of nice, like a chapter has finally closed, and I don't have to tiptoe around anymore like I did these past few days. Tomorrow, Kai and I are going to the gym for yoga, to relax and maybe figure out what to do next. We both took a day off, and I'm sorting out my finances. I hope to start the divorce process soon so I can finally call him my ex. I'm still a complete mess. My desk is still covered with our photos, and our wedding picture is still the wallpaper on all my devices. I know my students will notice his sudden disappearance from my life, and I'll have to tell them that the guy I used to talk so much about is now divorcing me. I'll have to tell my family and friends too, the ones who are my main support right now. It hurts to realize that eventually Kai and I will have to move out separately because he's the only real support I have in this whole mess. Housing, divorce expenses, lawyers, therapy. Sigh, so much ahead.
It's hard to believe I once thought this relationship was perfect. Anyway, thank you all so much. I've already written about how much support I've received here, but honestly, your sincerity and kindness, without exaggeration, saved my life. I would have kept living with that cheater otherwise, and Kai too. This community is incredible. So many kind people who care, follow my story, and wish me well. I'll definitely come back for advice again, but please know I've read everything. Yes, everything, and I've seen all your kind words. Author's note. I've been scrolling through the comments for a while now, and honestly, I'm amazed at how many people responded to my story. There's a lot I need to clarify, so here we go. Not much has changed. It's only been a week since my last update. My husband and I briefly talked about the upcoming divorce. That's all. I'm still healing, working, and slowly getting back to myself. Ask me again in a year, maybe I'll be better then. As for Allison, the mistress, I still haven't been able to contact her, though some of your advice really inspired me to try again. And about Kai and me? I know many of you are discussing this, so I'll clarify right away. Kai and I are rebuilding our friendship. Honestly, I don't think we'd work as a couple. Kai wants a calm and independent life for two, while I dream of having kids. He admitted that he has a very low libido, one of the reasons he blames himself for everything that happened, and mine, on the contrary, is high. Plus, now we're more like brother and sister. Still, thank you for worrying about my options. I'm not ready to date yet, and probably won't be for a while. This story is fake. Gotcha! Just kidding. I wish it were fake. No hurts on you if you don't believe me. Not everything on the internet can be trusted, and I doubt I can convince you otherwise. But unfortunately, yes, I live in this reality, and no hate messages will change that. About family, friends, students, and so on. My family is of course on my side. Most of our mutual friends, too. Yes, I told my students everything, and you know what? They were incredibly supportive. I've already cleared my desk of all reminders of him. The next step is to clear my head of that lotion-scented man. I tried to recreate his look as best I could. I'll post a photo on my profile soon. Edit, there he is. If I missed something, let me know. There are so many comments. I haven't gone through all the new messages yet, and I'm really sorry I can't reply to everyone. I'm super busy right now, but I hope to catch up with some of you over the weekend.
Third update, the final one, Lotion Man Years Later. Oh God, that title is awful. Sorry, I'll come up with something better once my brain starts working again. It's that time of year, you know? Check in on your teacher friends if you have any. Hey everyone, it's been a long time, but I finally logged back into this account. And wow, I don't even know where to start. So much support, so many New Year wishes. It's just incredible. I love the internet sometimes. You were with me when I was at my lowest point. I've gotten dozens of messages asking how I've been, what's new, and even stories from people who went through almost the same thing. One girl said her boyfriend blamed everything on their new puppy. Seriously. She even sent a photo of that little fluff ball. It's crazy how such a painful experience turned out to be so common. Still, I haven't lost faith in humanity, thanks to the wave of love you've all given me. It's been almost 2 years now. It feels like an eternity ago and just yesterday. All right, to the point. Let's start with the bad news. Kai and I had a pretty big fight. I won't go into every detail, that would take about 30 pages, but long story short, we were roommates. We lived together, shared everything, chores, shopping, daily life. Whenever I went to the store, he knew. I knew when he got home from work. We were just always aware of each other's schedules because we lived side by side and ran a shared household. At some point, Kai told me he was going on a date. Cool, I was happy for him. I was still deep in the divorce process then, emotionally shattered, not thinking about relationships at all. Kai and Marie, since they never married, broke up a bit easier than I did, but it was still hard. He went on one date, then another, and that was it. A week passed without news, so I asked, what happened? He just said she was ghosting him. Then, a week later, out of nowhere, he dropped a bombshell. He was dating Marie. I know, sounds insane, right? But he told me this while sitting on the couch crying like a kid. and I couldn't even be mad. I just felt sorry for him. It's not easy to recover from broken relationships. He said those dates made him realize that everything between them really was over for good. He described it like this, or close to it. When I first met Marie, she seemed like a sweet, polite girl next door, like a cashier with a kind smile. But as I got to know her, I found out she was fun and free-spirited. That's what I fell for. And when I saw her again recently, it felt like she'd reset to factory settings. That hit him hard, like he'd gone full circle for nothing. After 2 dates, he didn't just ghost her, he blocked her everywhere. It was a bit hard for me to listen to. It reminded me way too much of my own situation, but I tried not to dwell on it and just comforted him. For a few months after that, everything was calm. During that time, Kai turned me into a total gym girl. It's funny rereading my old posts, how skeptical I was about the gym back then. Anyway, after a few peaceful months, Kai had news again. He was going on another date, this time with a friend of a friend. I said the usual, great, go for it. I was still angry at the world, still legally married, so I wasn't thinking about new relationships. As I mentioned, Kai and I unintentionally kept tabs on each other because of how we lived. So when he started leaving home at 2 p.m. and returning at 8 p.m., his dates lasting hours, of course I noticed. I didn't say anything. I figured maybe he was just smitten, which made sense. But his absences were pretty noticeable. He even asked me to do little errands for him because he knew he wouldn't have time due to his long outings. Eventually, I met the girl. Her name was Grace. She was in her 20s, very sweet, and also a teacher. She worked in an elementary school, but we still had a lot to talk about. At that point, everything seemed perfect. Kai and Grace were adorable together. Summer went by peacefully. Everything felt stable. I had just officially finalized my divorce. But damn, those dates were endless. Even the short ones lasted 3 or 4 hours. He would just disappear. So I finally decided to bring it up carefully. Kai said Grace usually picked the meeting spots herself, places 1 or 2 hours away with traffic. When I asked where Grace actually lived, maybe they were meeting halfway, he calmly said, I don't really know. That's when alarm bells went off in my head. Maybe I've read too many infidelity forums, but something about it felt off. Grace couldn't have lived that far away. She was friends with one of our mutual acquaintances. They'd been dating for months. She'd even had dinner at our place more than once, and yet he didn't know where she lived and all their meetings happened miles away. Suspicious much? So yeah, I probably crossed the line. I searched her name on Instagram and boom, Grace in a wedding dress with some guy named Mike. The post was from 2019. She was married. I shot up from bed and ran straight to wake Kai up. Yes, I know, total idiot move. It was midnight. He had work at 7 a.m. and there I was, waving my phone in his face like a lunatic. When I finally stopped rambling, Kai exploded. He went from groggy to furious in 2 seconds flat. He started yelling at me for invading his privacy, demanding why the hell I was snooping in his relationship. When I tried to explain my concerns, he got even angrier. Within minutes, it turned into a full-blown shouting match. He accused me of crossing every possible line, which honestly was partially true, but we lived together, always knowing what was going on in each other's lives. I asked him why he was mad if I was just worried about him. He fired back that I was obsessed with him, that we'd long felt like our friendship had crossed the line, and that's why I was stalking him. That's when I lost it completely. I said things I regret, brought up Marie and told him I wouldn't date him for $1 million. He started yelling back, calling me names. It was ugly. Eventually, I stormed out. The next morning, he woke me up before work. I thought he'd cooled off, maybe even come to apologize, but instead, he dropped a bomb. He knew. He'd known Grace was married almost from the start, but didn't care. Apparently, her husband was a good guy, but Grace told Kai she didn't feel anything for him anymore, so he just went along with it.
I was stunned. I asked how he'd feel if Marie's lovers knew she was engaged and still slept with her. He got defensive again, shouting at me not to bring up Marie. We argued, not as loud as the night before, but still heated. He said he'd kept it secret because he knew I'd make a scene. I told him that cheating was a deep wound for me, and I'd expected it to be the same for him.
But he looked me straight in the eyes and said, "It's not." Then he added that living with me was already like being in a relationship and that I had no right to interfere in his personal life. That one really hit hard. I said, "Fine, date whoever you want. I just wanted you to know you're helping someone cheat." He shrugged, said he didn't care, and left for work. I wasn't his mother, I couldn't control him, but I thought he deserved to know he'd become the other man. If I were in his place, I'd want someone to tell me the truth. And if someone told me my partner was cheating, I'd end it instantly. But Kai's moral compass, it seems, worked differently. We kept living together for a bit, but the atmosphere became cold and strained. I lost respect for him. He still saw grace, and worse, seemed convinced I had feelings for him. Eventually, I packed my things and moved in with a friend. It turned out to be the best decision, even though it was far from work. As for my ex-husband, not long after the divorce was finalized, he got engaged to another woman. Right after I'd moved out, I hit rock bottom. There was chaos at school over AI and student essays. I was trying to build a new life in a place where I knew no one, and the loneliness was eating me alive. I tried a few dates, but they were all so mediocre I gave up, which somehow made the loneliness worse. And just when I thought things couldn't get any bleaker, my ex reached out. He told me about his engagement, his new life, and how happy he was. Said he was working on self-improvement and wanted to apologize in person. He promised it wasn't a date, that he expected nothing from me. I should have said no, but I was emotionally drained, and the idea of closure sounded like relief. So I agreed. At first, it was civil. We exchanged small talk. He even gave a genuine apology. But then he started asking questions. How was I doing? Was I seeing anyone? And when he realized I wasn't doing great, that smirk appeared, that same smug Cheshire grin I'd seen before. He started bragging about his new fiancée, about how beautiful she was, about how amazing his life had become. Then he said, "Honestly, our breakup was a blessing in disguise." It felt like a knife in my chest. All those years I'd given him, and he called them a burden. Eventually, I made some excuse and left. I wasn't invited to the wedding, obviously, and I regretted agreeing to meet him at all. But life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. After months of dragging myself through the days, I finally went on another date. That's when I met Chase, 29, bright, kind, a total goofball. He's the best thing that ever happened to me. I used to think I needed a brooding, mysterious man to balance my energy. But here's my advice. If you're a sunny person, don't look for someone dark to complete you. Find someone who shines with you. Chase makes me laugh every day. There are no fake conversations, no one-sided love, just two weird, happy people being completely themselves. We joke, we dream, we build new memories, and life finally feels alive again. Now it's 2025. I've got my own place near work. I even started going back to my old gym. And of course, that's where I saw Kai again. He didn't notice me first, but when he did, he came right up, apologized sincerely, and said he regretted how things ended. Told me he'd be glad if we could talk again someday. Maybe we will, maybe not. Honestly, he feels like a character from the first movie who suddenly shows up in the sequel, someone from a chapter that's long since closed. My life now feels completely different, with Chase, with my own home, with peace and laughter. Well, except for one thing. The Lotion Man. Yes, I finally showed Chase the infamous drawing. My hands were shaking, but I did it. He burst out laughing so hard he cried. Now it's become our little tradition. We've got the Soap Man, the Ketchup Man, the Cream Man, even the Floor Man. Don't ask. Everything with a doodled face becomes a character, and each has a ridiculous accent. And honestly, it's perfect. Life moves on. We heal, we grow, we laugh again. And the best part, I've stopped apologizing for who I am. Because if you shine too bright for the box you're in, the problem isn't your light, it's the box. So get out of it. I'll never apologize again for being myself.
Almost 7 years ago, my family cut me off completely and threw me out of the house. At the time, I was only 22,
still working my first job, not financially stable enough to rent on my own. It all happened so suddenly that I had no time to prepare, emotionally or financially. And the reason for all of it was my sister, Hannah. Hannah and I were never especially close. She was quite a bit older than me. By the time she was 27, she married her boyfriend, Pete. They stayed married for about 3 years before she filed for divorce, claiming Pete had been cheating on her with one of my friends. Back then, I was still living with my parents after college, saving money before moving out. Everything at home was fine until Hannah came back one night in tears, declaring she'd discovered Pete's betrayal. According to her, he had been having an affair for 6 months, and somehow it was my fault. The reason? I had introduced Pete to my friend Emily. She had been struggling to gain weight, and since Pete was a certified nutritionist, he offered to help her out. That was it. Hannah twisted that into a story that Emily was the woman Pete cheated with. I was stunned. Emily and I weren't super close, but I knew her well enough to believe she would never get involved with a married man. And Pete, if anything, he always seemed hopelessly devoted to Hannah. He talked about her constantly, and not once in those 3 years did I see anything suspicious. But none of my doubts mattered. My parents instantly sided with Hannah. They didn't ask for evidence, didn't question anything. They just took her word for it. I can't blame them for choosing their daughter over their son-in-law, but what broke me was how quickly they turned on me. Hannah stormed into the house one day, hysterical, and convinced them that I was to blame for ruining her marriage, simply because I had introduced Pete to Emily. Within minutes, they told me to pack my things and leave. When I begged them to listen, they said if I didn't go on my own, they'd throw me out. And just like that, I lost my home and my family in the same day. I still remember sitting on the curb outside with my bags, crying for an hour before finally calling a friend to let me crash at his place. I tried reaching out to my parents in the days that followed. Calls, texts, visits, nothing worked. They blocked my number. The one time I went to the house, my mom threatened to call the police if I didn't leave. That's when it hit me. They truly believed I was responsible. Looking back, maybe I shouldn't have been surprised. Hannah was always the favorite. I was the unexpected second child, the one who got leftovers while she got the spotlight. As kids, it didn't matter much to me, but I never thought that favoritism would destroy my place in the family entirely. Pete blocked me too. No explanation, no chance to defend myself. And Hannah moved back in with my parents, making it impossible for me to even try talking things out. The only person left who might know the truth was Emily. We weren't close, but I reached out anyway. And when I explained what Hannah had accused me of, she was horrified. She swore nothing ever happened between her and Pete, that their interactions had been strictly professional. To prove it, she even told me about her long-term boyfriend. They were already talking about marriage. She showed me photos of the two of them together. Her explanation made infinitely more sense than anything Hannah had said. Deep down, I already knew Hannah had lied, probably to cover the real reason for the divorce. But without any proof, I was powerless. My family had made up their minds, and I was left alone. Back then, all I wanted was to reconnect with my family. Despite everything they had done to me, I still missed them terribly. But as time passed, I had no choice but to adapt. I found an apartment, poured myself into work, and tried to build a life. Bills had to be paid, and keeping myself busy was the only way I knew how to cope. It wasn't easy. The pain was overwhelming. But slowly, I taught myself to move forward, with or without their support. Years went by, and life began to change for the better. I moved out of that tiny apartment into something much nicer, built a stable career, and just last week, I proposed to the woman I've been dating for 2 years. She said yes. But the real turning point came shortly after my engagement. A few days after my fiancée, Lisa, posted our engagement photos on Instagram and cross-shared them to Facebook, I got an email. Not just any email, but the email that finally explained everything that had happened years ago, complete with proof. It turned out that Lisa, who works as a doctor, had once met Pete, my former brother-in-law, at a medical seminar. They had stayed loosely connected on Facebook. That's how he stumbled across our engagement post. For the first time in years, I was glad the world was so small. Instead of messaging me directly, Pete chose to send an anonymous email. Later, he explained it was because he didn't want to seem awkward. After all, years had passed since the divorce, and he had no desire to look like someone still clinging to the past. He also admitted that since he'd blocked me back then, it felt strange to just pop back up in my life. But what mattered was the content. The email laid out the full truth behind the divorce, and it completely shattered the story Hannah had built. It was Hannah who had been unfaithful, not Pete. And worse, she had cheated with my friend Frank. At the time, Frank worked as a cashier at the local grocery store. Never in a million years would I have suspected anything between them. They'd been so careful to hide it. But Pete eventually found out. When confronted, Hannah tried to twist the situation, telling Pete that it was my fault. She claimed I had introduced her to Frank, even encouraging their connection by mentioning his interest in music since she was a decent singer herself. From there, she said, things just happened. To cover her tracks, she even insisted I had helped them hide the affair all along, which was, of course, a blatant lie. Pete admitted he was furious when he found out. Instead of thinking clearly, he blocked everyone in my family, including me. Looking back, he knows it was the wrong move, but at the time, anger clouded everything.
The email itself included screenshots of conversations between Hannah and Frank. Messages where they openly confessed their love, joked about how easy it was to fool Pete, and arranged secret meetups. Hannah had even signed off using her rarely mentioned middle name, something only a few people knew. There was no denying it. Reading those messages was surreal. For the first time in years, I had undeniable proof. Hannah had lied about everything. I eventually confronted Pete in person after realizing he was in Lisa's Facebook friends list. He admitted that Emily, my friend who had originally been accused, had told him her side years ago. He just never told me because he didn't want to stir things up again. He regretted it now, because if he had spoken up earlier, I could have cleared my name long ago. Still, he was willing to help me now. Pete and I agreed that Hannah's lies had destroyed enough lives, and neither of us wanted her manipulations to stand unchallenged any longer. The truth was clear. Hannah had weaponized her family's trust to protect herself, even if it meant sacrificing me. She dragged my name through the mud, convinced my parents to disown me, all to keep her own reputation intact while she pursued her affair. And for the first time in years, I had the evidence to finally set the record straight. I'm certain my sister never once tried to tell our parents the truth. Instead, she kept feeding them lies during the divorce, and they swallowed every word without hesitation. She knew that if our parents ever discovered she was the one who cheated, she'd be in serious trouble, and she just couldn't allow that. Well, now the truth is finally out, and I'm going to use it to destroy her life the same way she destroyed mine all those years ago. I wasn't sure if my parents were still living in the same house, since I hadn't seen them in 7 years, but an old neighbor confirmed they never moved. Even better, Hannah still lived there. That didn't surprise me at all. She was always lazy and hated responsibility. Living off aging parents while they did everything for her was exactly her style. 2 days ago, Pete and I showed up unannounced. My mom opened the door, and we pushed our way inside before she could react. My dad and Hannah were sitting in the living room, the happy family reunited, but only for a moment. Their faces twisted as soon as they saw us. My dad immediately started shouting, threatening to call the police if we didn't leave. I told him he could do whatever he wanted, but only after reading the documents we brought. My parents looked confused, while Hannah turned pale and bolted to her room. I figured she was trying to avoid the inevitable.
but there was no escaping it. Pete pulled out the divorce papers and screenshots of Hannah's messages with Frank, while I explained the real story. Pete also revealed how Hannah had been forced to give up our grandmother's diamond heirloom ring to settle the divorce, since her teacher salary couldn't cover the payout. My parents were stunned. We sat there watching as the drama unfolded. My dad demanded answers from Hannah, but when she tried lying yet again, even with the evidence right in front of her, he'd had enough. He packed her belongings, shoved them into a bag, and kicked her out of the house on the spot. I didn't need to be told twice. Pete and I walked out together, leaving Hannah begging our parents to let her back in, exactly the way I had once begged them years ago. It was the sweetest revenge. I felt nothing but satisfaction. A couple days later, Hannah showed up at my place, demanding I fix things with our parents. I don't even know how she found my address, but I told her point blank that I owed her nothing. She ruined my life, and I simply returned the favor. We were even now. Apparently, she has no pride left, because the moment I said that, she broke down sobbing, calling me a monster. I honestly didn't care. I put on my headphones, turned up the music, and let Lisa keep working peacefully in her office. Eventually, she left, but not before scrawling a message on my door with a marker reminding me that I'm a vengeful monster. To be honest, I don't feel bad about what I did. I don't think I'm the villain here. I didn't lie or scheme like she did. I just exposed the truth. So, am I really the bad guy for ruining my sister's life and getting her kicked out of our parents' home 7 years after she blamed me for her divorce? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Update 1. Hannah didn't stop bothering me. Even after a week, she kept calling non-stop, 14 times in a day. I finally threatened to involve the police, and that made her back off, at least for now. I have no idea how she keeps getting my number after I block her, but apparently she has her friends add me into group calls from different numbers. She's tried guilt-tripping me, saying her teacher salary isn't enough to live on. But I know that's not the real issue. What she really hates is finally having to pay rent, utilities, and groceries herself. And honestly, that's not my problem. As for my parents, they're not much better. They found me on Facebook after seeing Lisa's engagement post. Now they're suddenly interested in being part of my life again. They even hinted that they expect to be invited to my wedding. They still haven't apologized, but somehow think they deserve to show up on one of the most important days of my life. Lisa and I laughed reading their messages because they were so delusional it almost seemed like a bad joke. But in truth, the whole thing is more sad than funny.
Update 2. Hannah showed up at my house again, even after I threatened to report her for harassment yesterday. I was getting ready to leave for work, but she stopped me by flopping onto the hood of my car, refusing to move until I spoke with her. It was incredibly annoying, and this time I actually called the police. They took her away while she screamed and cried, trying to paint me as the bad guy. Unfortunately for her, nobody bought it. It took some time to file the official report against her, but as soon as I did, I rushed to work so this incident wouldn't ruin my day. I figured my parents would bail her out since she's their favorite, and I was right. They sent her home and then followed up with a long message telling me I had been too harsh and unfair to them over a mistake they supposedly made almost 10 years ago. It was laughable. Nothing my sister and parents did to me back then could ever be called merciful or fair. No mercy stopped them from literally throwing me out of the house with nowhere to go. So now, I see no reason to offer forgiveness or kindness. I messaged my parents saying that after all these years, they had lost any right to tell me what I can or cannot do, and that they should stop deluding themselves. I haven't blocked them yet, had to check the message first, but I will soon. Hopefully then, I can finally cut that whole family out of my life for good. Update 3. I just got home from work, checked my socials, and saw that my parents sent me another long message. Lisa and I read it together, and I swear it was the funniest thing I've ever seen. These poor people don't realize that nothing they say or do now can hurt me. I just laughed at how pathetic they are. They still think we're a family and announced they'd taken Hannah back, claiming both of their children deserve a second chance, as if I was ever in the wrong.
They expected Lisa and me to visit them for dinner before my wedding to civilly resolve our differences. Too bold of them to assume I'd ever want them anywhere near my wedding. We laughed at their absurd message, and I responded that I had zero interest in any invitations from them. I'm perfectly happy living my life without them, just like I have for the last 7 years. They made it clear long ago that I'm better off without them. I'm grateful it took me so long to realize that. I no longer need them or their so-called forgiveness. They can continue playing happy family with Hannah all they want. I don't care. After sending that last message, I blocked them permanently. That's it. I'm done. I'm sure they'll try to contact me again somehow, but it doesn't matter. Lisa is the only family I need, and I'm happier than I've ever been with just her. My parents and sister never could see past their own noses, and I doubt they ever will. Next time they try to reach out, they'll be talking to my lawyer.
My parents are filming my life. My parents and I travel around the country in an RV. They post our lives online, and I hate them a little more for it every single day. When I was around 7, my parents decided to live in a camper and travel across the US. My dad works remotely, and my mom is a lifestyle blogger. She's not super famous, but popular enough that sometimes people recognize us in public. So, a camera has been pointed at me for as long as I can remember. For privacy reasons, I'm writing this from a throwaway account. I've already had more unwanted attention than most people see in a lifetime, and I'm exhausted from it. I sleep on a tiny bunk bed I outgrew years ago. The top bunk is the only place where I can keep my personal things. I don't even have a room, just a curtain. And honestly, thank God I'm an only child, or I'd have to share even that little bit of space. I was homeschooled most of my life, and when I hit high school, I insisted on switching to an online program. I'm 18 now, and I don't have a single real-life friend. We never stay anywhere longer than a month. I don't have a job either. It's impossible when you never live in one place. I could try online work, but that still wouldn't give me the independence to move out. I've talked to my parents about our lifestyle more times than I can count, but they're so deep in denial they truly believe this nomad life is the best possible way to live. They act like I'm some pet they can drag along on their adventures. I hate traveling. I can't stand the heat, the bugs, or the endless hiking. I'm sick of sleeping in different parking lots every week. I can't wait for the day I can finally escape, away from their sunrise hikes and the ever-present camera shoved in my face. Yes, I've technically seen the whole country, but does that mean I'm not allowed to want a normal life? To go to college? To have friends? It feels like I'm asking for too much. Comments and my thoughts. People often tell me how lucky I am to live this way, but honestly, it's lonely beyond words. Someone once asked if I had any other relatives I could stay with. Sadly, I thought I didn't. My current plan is to find some kind of online work, save as much money as I can, and eventually rent a small apartment. I've also been talking to an online friend about possibly becoming roommates someday to share expenses. College might be my best shot at getting out, even though it's expensive. It would at least be a real step toward freedom and maybe a chance to finally have a life of my own. Still, I'm nervous. Being homeschooled left me far behind academically, and high school was already hard enough. Honestly, I'm just proud I managed to graduate from online school at all, instead of continuing full homeschooling. Someone joked that if I started making content about escaping my hipster parents, I'd probably go viral. And yes, the thought crossed my mind. Not for fame, but to raise awareness about what it's like to have your childhood turned into content. But I decided against it for a few reasons. First, it wouldn't be sustainable. People would lose interest after the story was told. Second, I'd need a stable, safe environment before putting myself out there publicly, and I don't have that yet. But most importantly, my life has already been on display without my consent. The only thing that's ever been truly mine is my privacy, and I don't want to give that up too. First update. Hi again. About a week ago, I posted about my awful experience living in an RV with my parents for nearly 10 years. It hasn't been long since then, but so much has changed. After the post blew up, I received hundreds of messages,
People offering advice, sharing resources, and some even offering help in person, which a few of which were questionable, to be honest. But most were kind, genuine people who just wanted to help, and I truly appreciate it. To be honest, it was overwhelming and I couldn't respond to everyone. But even if I didn't reply, I read everything. One question that kept coming up was, do you have any relatives you could stay with? I used to think the answer was no. My dad's side is non-existent, and my mom completely cut ties with her family years ago. She never talked about them. I didn't even know if they were alive. All I had was my mom's rare maiden name and her birthplace. Turns out that was enough to start with. It's ironic. I've always kind of hated the internet because I never had a choice in being online. My life was public without my consent. But for once, I'm genuinely grateful it exists. With some effort, I managed to find information about my mom's family, including my grandmother's old Facebook profile. It took a while to work up the courage, but eventually I messaged her. I told her about my mom, about myself, and about my situation. I won't share the details of why my mom cut contact with her family. That's not my story to tell. But my grandmother was shocked to learn she had a granddaughter she never knew existed. She was even more horrified to find out how I'd been raised. Through her, I discovered that I have an aunt and an uncle. My grandmother told them everything, and now I'm in touch with all three of them. They all want to help me get out, and since I'm legally an adult now, it's finally possible. I won't reveal too many details for safety reasons, but I've already arranged to move in with my aunt. She lives in a big city on the West Coast, a place full of opportunities for college and work. And yes, I'm planning to enroll in college soon, which feels surreal but exciting. My uncle has kids of his own, but my aunt lives alone and offered me her spare room for as long as I need it. She even bought my train ticket herself. I already have enough money to make it to the station. It still feels strange to say it out loud, but I'm talking to my family now. Real family. I'm still figuring out how or if I should tell my parents. My mom doesn't even know where her relatives live, so even if I said who I'm going to, she wouldn't know where that is. Some people suggested that if I decide to leave without telling them directly, I should leave a note or a short video explaining that I left willingly, just in case they make it sound like I was taken. That's probably what I'll do. Funny, isn't it? After all those years of being filmed, I might end up recording a video from myself, the only one that actually matters. As for my mom's content, I've been keeping quiet whenever the camera's on. Thankfully, neither of them has noticed anything unusual yet. Before I end this, I want to make one thing clear. Most of the people who reached out were kind and helpful, but a few tried to guess who I am. Luckily, commenters called them out and they deleted their posts. Some even messaged me privately trying to figure it out. I get the curiosity, I do, but I made this post anonymously for a reason. I've had enough attention to last a lifetime and I'm done with it. So please, even if you think you figured out who I am, don't share it. Let me keep what's left of my privacy. Long story short, I finally have a plan to leave and a safe place to go. If someone had told me 2 weeks ago that not only would I have a way out, but that I'd reconnect with family I didn't even know existed, I never would have believed them.
Final update. Hi everyone, I'm not planning to post another update for now, but I wanted to calm those who were worried about me. I'm doing fine. Truly, thank you all for your kindness and support. To answer some of the concerns people had, yes, I'm aware I don't really know my mom's side of the family yet, and I promise I'm being careful. I understand why my mom doesn't talk to them, and honestly, after seeing the documents and hearing their side, I believe them. They showed me actual court papers and messages that explained everything. My train isn't today or tomorrow, so before leaving, I'm still keeping in touch with them. They've been genuinely caring and trustworthy so far. My aunt, the one I'll be living with, is incredibly sweet. We already found a few shared interests, and she makes me feel welcome. Oh, and I don't think I mentioned this before. I'm applying to college. For the first time, it feels possible. Hopefully, I'll be living in a dorm, so I won't stay with my aunt for long, just until things settle down. Some people told me not to record a goodbye video for my parents, and you're right.
it would only be used for their content. I was angry and hurt when I thought about doing it, but I've realized it's not worth it. Maybe one day I'll talk to them face to face, but not now. Someone gave a really smart piece of advice to contact the local police non-emergency line once I move, just to let them know where I'll be staying and ask for a welfare check after a few weeks. That's actually a brilliant idea. Thank you for that suggestion. Second update. Hi again. It's been some time, and I wanted to share how things turned out. In my previous post, I said I'd gotten in touch with my relatives on my mom's side and might have a place to go. Well, I did it. I'm safe now, away from my parents, and we no longer speak. My aunt is an absolute angel, kind, understanding, and full of warmth. My grandmother and uncle are just as amazing. When I first arrived, my aunt and grandma took me on a mini shopping trip. Clothes, room decor, everything I could possibly need. And yes, I finally have my own room. My uncle introduced me to my cousins. He has a son and a daughter about my age. We've already become good friends. We hang out, laugh, and just live like normal teens. My aunt helps me research nearby colleges, but keeps reminding me not to rush things, that I can take my time, and that her home will always be open to me. She's someone I've grown to deeply admire. The more time we spend together, the more I realize how much we have in common. I'm endlessly grateful for the love and acceptance they've shown me. For the first time in my life, I'm discovering who I really am. I changed my hair color and cut, picked out a new nickname, and that's what I go by now. My cousin helps me with makeup and shares her favorite music. She calls herself a cringe-free pop fan, but honestly, she's awesome. I even made a private Instagram, only 5 followers, and I plan to keep it that way. For once, I feel like a normal teenager. I look in the mirror and genuinely like who I see. I didn't realize how uncomfortable I'd been in my own skin before, always trying to take care of everyone else, but never myself. Now, I'm finally free to breathe, to grow, to just be. I've started seeing a therapist, and she suggested writing this update as a way to close the past chapter of my life, to let go, and to move forward. This will be my last update. I want to live my life, enjoy my future, and keep my personal space. Many people ask me to share more about my childhood or everything that happened, but I'm not ready. This is my story, and I decide what to share. For the first time, I have control over who knows what about me, and I'm not giving that up. I'm truly happy now. I'm safe, I'm making plans, thinking about my future, and discovering who I am beyond the image my parents created. Thank you all for your kindness, advice, and compassion. Goodbye, and thank you for helping me get here.
My ex-wife is trying to win me back by using our daughters. Doesn't sound too serious at first, right? Yeah, it's what I thought too. But as much as I'd love to tell my ex to go to hell and never see her again, we share 2 daughters and joint custody. So completely cutting her out of my life just isn't possible, not unless I walk away from my kids too, which I'd never do. We got married young, 20 years old, dating for 3 years before that. Our daughters were born during the first year of marriage. After the second birth, my ex had complications that made it difficult for her to get pregnant again. I didn't care. I was just grateful she made it through safely, and that we already had 2 beautiful little girls to love. The marriage lasted 9 years. It ended when I filed for divorce after discovering she cheated. I have 0 tolerance for betrayal. I refuse to make myself miserable for something I didn't cause. Maybe it sounds strange, but my love for her died the exact moment I learned about her affair in detail. So no, this isn't some story about a man who can't let go. I moved on 7 years ago. Hell, I don't even hate her. I just don't care. Whatever happens in her life means nothing to me, unless it directly affects our kids. The problem is, I seem to be the only one who's actually moved on. My ex, her family, and even our daughters keep trying to push us back together.
even though I've made it crystal clear that I have absolutely no desire to ever be with her again. Maybe the fact that I stayed single for years after the divorce gave them false hope. But honestly, I just wasn't ready to jump into anything new. My daughters were my top priority. Plus, I had my own emotional mess to sort through after her betrayal, which, thankfully, I managed with help from friends, family, and therapy. My relationship with my daughters is great. We don't fight, we don't yell, and they're not rebellious or dramatic. Everything's been peaceful, except for one issue. They know their mother cheated. She told them herself about 3 years ago. Since then, I think she's been feeding them her version of events. I've asked her countless times to stop. It doesn't help anyone, least of all the girls. But instead of stopping, she just got sneakier about it. Since the divorce, she hasn't dated anyone, or even tried. I guess she thinks that makes her look noble. But honestly, I find it insulting. She could cheat on me while we were married, but now she's suddenly living like a saint? Whatever. That's her problem, not mine. For years, I could ignore the little comments my daughters made about their mom. How good she looks now, how happy she seems, the photos she just happened to show them where she's clearly dressed up to impress. But lately, things have gotten worse. Why? Because I started seeing someone. Clemence isn't the first woman I've dated since the divorce, but this is by far the most serious relationship I've had since it ended. She's 8 years older than me. We actually knew each other for about 4 years before anything romantic happened. We shared a hobby, became close friends, and eventually realized there was more between us. And yes, I genuinely love her. It even surprised me when I realized it. I honestly thought my ex's betrayal had broken something inside me, that I'd never be able to love again the way I once did. At first, my daughters didn't know much about Clemence. Just like my previous relationships, I kept things private. But eventually, they started coming home earlier than expected and began seeing her around. Nothing inappropriate ever happened, but soon came the sighs, the cold looks, and the questions. What is she doing here? Don't you think it's unfair to Mom? It was like they thought I was dating just to spite their mother. I sat them down for a serious talk, explained everything over and over, but it just didn't sink in. They're still clinging to some childish fantasy where their parents get back together. Clemence, thankfully, is incredibly understanding. She doesn't take it personally and keeps saying, give them time. But honestly, I'm not convinced time will fix this. It hasn't yet, so why would it now? I've run out of ideas. That's why I'm asking for advice. Is there any way, any possible approach to help my daughters finally understand that I will never get back with their mother?
Sounds harmless enough, right? Well, not really. As much as I'd love to tell my ex to get lost and never see her again, we share 2 daughters and have joint custody. So, cutting her out of my life completely isn't an option, unless I'm willing to lose my kids too. We got married young, both 20, after dating for 3 years. Our twin girls were born during the first year of marriage. My ex had some complications after that, which made future pregnancies difficult. At the time, I didn't care about that at all. I was just grateful she survived everything safely, and that we already had 2 beautiful little girls we adored. Our marriage lasted 9 years. It ended when I filed for divorce after discovering she had cheated. I have zero tolerance for that kind of betrayal, and saw no reason to keep suffering for something that wasn't my fault. Some might find it strange, but every ounce of love I had for her died the moment I learned the full story of her affair. So no, this isn't some sad tale about a man who can't move on. I did, 7 years ago. Hell, I don't even hate her anymore. I just couldn't care less what happens in her life as long as it doesn't affect our daughters. The real problem is that I'm the only one who truly moved on. My ex, her family, and even our daughters keep trying to reunite us, despite me being very clear that I have zero interest in ever being with her again. Maybe the fact that I didn't date anyone for years after the divorce gave them false hope. But honestly, I wasn't about to jump into another relationship that fast, especially when I had 2 girls to raise. They were my priority.
Eventually, with the help of friends, family, and therapy, I got my mental health back on track. My relationship with my daughters has always been great. No fights, no yelling, no teenage rebellion, yet they're smart, kind, and we've always been close. But there's one big problem. They know their mother cheated on me because she told them about 3 years ago. Since then, I'm pretty sure she's been feeding them a twisted version of events. I've asked her countless times to stop dragging them into our adult mess, but she doesn't listen. She hasn't dated anyone since the divorce, hasn't even slept with anyone apparently. She thinks that makes her look noble. Personally, I find it insulting. When we were married, she was sleeping with someone else, and now she suddenly can live without intimacy for 7 years? Whatever, that's her problem. For years, I brushed off the occasional mentions of her looks or the photos my daughter showed me where she clearly dressed up just to make an impression. But things changed after I started dating again. My girlfriend Clemens isn't my first relationship since the divorce, but she's definitely the most serious one. She's 8 years younger than me, and we'd known each other for 4 years before we started dating. It grew naturally, from friendship into something deeper. And honestly, I love her. I didn't expect that. I thought my ex's betrayal had broken something inside me, that I'd never be able to love again. Turns out I was wrong. At first, my daughters didn't know much about my relationship with Clemens. Then they started showing up at my house earlier than scheduled, sometimes finding her there. We were never inappropriate, just living our normal lives. But soon came the questions, what is she doing here? Or, that's not fair to mom. It's like they genuinely believe I'm seeing someone just to hurt their mother. I've had long, honest talks with them, but they just don't seem to get it. They can't let go of the fantasy that their parents might reunite someday. Thankfully, Clemens is understanding. She says the girls just need time, though I'm not sure that will help. It hasn't so far. So yeah, I came online looking for advice. Maybe someone out there knows how to help my daughters finally understand that no matter what happens, I'm never going back to their mother. When I try explaining that you can't be faithful to someone you're no longer with, they just ignore it. I've begged my ex countless times to stop manipulating the girls and keep them out of our adult issues, but she doesn't care. At one point, I even considered going to court to get full custody, but was advised it probably backfired. The truth is, my daughters know why we divorced. They know their mother cheated. I usually don't recommend telling kids something like that, but mine are old enough now. The problem is that their understanding of the story is based entirely on her version, filled with excuses and self-pity. A year ago, I finally tried explaining my side, only to find out she had already told them years before, when they were around 13. They know what she did, but they can't comprehend it emotionally. To them, their mother has always been loving and caring. They can't imagine her cold and distant like she was during the affair. Back then, she completely shut me out. Not just physically, but emotionally. She stopped doing little things. Morning kisses before work, random hugs, shared jokes, all gone. I realized something was off and eventually, with a close friend's help, uncovered the truth. She had been giving all that affection to someone else. I'll never forgive that. My daughters don't understand why, and honestly, I don't want them to. No child should ever have to carry that kind of pain. So when they talk about regret, forgiveness, or getting back together, I just can't relate. Where was all that love when it mattered? Update. It's been a while since my original post. A lot has changed. My daughters actually found that post by accident. I had no idea they were even on that site. One day, I came home from work and found them both in tears. They ran to me, hugged me, and begged me to forgive them. Apparently, they'd read one of my comments and learned the full extent of their mother's affair and how deeply it hurt me back then. We went through a lot of therapy together. Honestly, I never blamed them. They were just kids, manipulated by their mother, who used their love as a weapon. After a few months of family therapy, the psychologist told us we no longer needed weekly sessions, just occasional check-ins. My daughters and I became closer than ever. Their relationship with their mom, though, took a hit, understandably.
I told them not to dwell on her mistakes. I've long since made peace with what she did. That's also something we worked through in therapy. I eventually had a serious talk with my ex, made it absolutely clear that the getting back together nonsense needed to stop. Whether she listened or not, I don't know, but at least she stopped bothering the girls with it. Or maybe they've learned to tune her out. Either way, as long as my daughters are okay, I don't care what she's doing. As things settled, Clements and my daughter started bonding, really bonding. They started talking to her more, even asking her for advice on girl stuff. The first time I saw that, I nearly cried. Not long after, Clements and the girls surprised me. They organized a private dinner, just the three of us. Then Clements proposed to me. Yeah, she beat me to it. I was stunned, but happier than I had been in years. Not just because of her proposal, but because my daughters helped her plan it. We had a small, intimate ceremony with close friends and family, and now we're expecting a baby. My daughters can't wait to become big sisters, and I honestly can't wait to watch them spoil their new sibling rotten.
Hi everyone. I turned 18 just a few days ago, and for my birthday, my dad surprised me with something incredible. My very first international trip to India, just the two of us. This trip was supposed to be something really special for so many reasons. My mom passed away when I was only 6. To cope with the loss, my dad and I used to watch Indian movies together all the time. They were colorful, uplifting, and helped brighten even the darkest days. That's how I fell in love with Indian culture. My mom loved those films too. She even had a collection of traditional Indian outfits, even though she never actually got to visit India herself. Before she died, she and my dad promised we'd go there as a family one day. Sadly, she passed away from a sudden brain aneurysm in her sleep before we could make that dream come true. She was only 32. After her death, it was just me and Dad. Watching movies together became our little ritual to keep her memory alive and stay close. Over the years, it made our bond stronger than ever. I know Mom would be proud of us today. That's why India has always held such a deep emotional meaning for both of us. It's not just a trip, it's a promise finally coming true. When Dad revealed at my birthday party that he'd booked the trip, I was ecstatic. I couldn't stop smiling. But not everyone was happy for me. My stepmom, Susan, and her daughter, Nadia, 17, looked like someone had slapped them. And sure enough, after the guests left, I overheard them arguing with my dad. From what I caught, Susan thought he should have postponed the trip so we could all go as a family. Honestly, I was relieved that it would just be the two of us. I don't get along with Susan or Nadia at all, and past family vacations with them were a nightmare. I couldn't imagine them ruining this one too, especially since it meant so much to me emotionally. Luckily, they had their own reasons not to join anyway. Nadia had her final exams and upcoming graduation, and Susan was tied up with an important project at work. Still, I can't help but feel Dad timed things perfectly so it could be just us, even if he'll never admit it. Susan and Nadia came into my life about 5 years ago. At first, everything seemed fine. They acted friendly enough while Dad was just dating Susan. But once he married her 2 years ago, things shifted. Their attitude toward me became cold and strange for no reason I could figure out. I hadn't done anything differently, yet suddenly I was treated like an outsider in my own home. And now, well, let's just say their jealousy hit a whole new level. Things were already bad with my stepmom and stepsister, but what they did before my trip crossed every line. I was never close with Susan or Nadia, but at least in the beginning our relationship was civil and polite. That all changed after Dad married Susan. Suddenly, she started treating me like dirt, and Nadia copied every move her mother made. They'd talk down to me, make nasty little remarks, and act cruel, but only when Dad wasn't around. The moment he walked into the room, they'd flip the switch and turn into sweet, smiling angels. It was so fake it made my skin crawl. Eventually, I needed to tell Dad what was going on. We sat down for a family talk,
and at first Susan and Nadia denied everything. Luckily, I had recorded one of our earlier conversations where they were openly horrible to me. With evidence on the table, they couldn't lie anymore. So instead of denying, they switched to emotional manipulation. They both burst into tears and told Dad they only acted that way because they felt like I hadn't accepted them as family, which was total nonsense. I did see them as family. It was them who treated me like garbage. Yet somehow they expected me to keep being nice to them while they showed me zero respect. Dad was confused and torn. Susan was the first woman he'd really cared for since Mom, and I knew he didn't want to lose that relationship so easily. He asked all of us to try harder to get along. For his sake, I agreed to keep things civil. After that, their behavior shifted again. Instead of being nice in front of Dad and cruel behind his back, they just chose to completely ignore me whenever he wasn't around. It was like I didn't exist. Honestly, I preferred it that way. At least they weren't actively tormenting me. For Dad's sake, we kept up the performance of being one happy family, and that carried on for about a year. Fast forward to just a few days ago. The morning after my birthday, Dad and I had breakfast together, and I pulled him aside. I asked him straight out if Susan and Nadia were upset about not joining us on the India trip. He admitted they were, but also reminded me how much this trip meant to us, especially with it falling so close to Mom's death anniversary. He wanted this to be our special time together, just father and daughter. He promised he'd smooth things over with them later. That was fine by me. Honestly, vacations with Susan and Nadia were torture. Dad and I are explorers. We love walking around, sightseeing, soaking up every bit of culture. They, on the other hand, prefer to sit in the hotel and complain if we're even a little late for dinner. To me, that's not a vacation. That's being trapped. India was supposed to be different. India was supposed to be ours. I didn't think there was anything wrong with that, especially since Susan and Nadia had taken their own little trips together in the past. The only real difference was that ours was longer and farther away, 10 days overseas instead of just a weekend somewhere nearby. But still, it felt completely fair. Dad told me not to stress, to focus on packing and getting ready. He promised he'd deal with Susan and Nadia after we got back. So I did exactly that. For the past 2 days, I was walking on air, too excited to care about their drama. Yesterday, I finished packing everything, double-checked my documents, and tucked my passport into my bag so it would be ready. Our flight was scheduled for today. But now, I don't even know if we're going anymore, because Susan and Nadia crossed a line so insane, I still can't believe it. They burned my passport. Yes, burned it. Not lost, not misplaced, they literally destroyed it. I found out just a few hours ago. It was around 6 p.m. yesterday when I was organizing paperwork and noticed it was missing from my bag. By 2 a.m., the truth came out. They had actually set it on fire.
They burned my passport before my trip. My dad's revenge was brutal. When I went through my bag to double-check everything before our flight, I realized my passport wasn't there. At first, I thought maybe I misplaced it, so I tore the entire house apart. Drawers, shelves, even the laundry baskets. 45 minutes later, I was sweating, panicking, and close to tears. It was just gone. That's when Susan and Nadia waltzed into my room with these fake sweet voices and asked, "Lose something?" I immediately felt something was off, but in desperation, I admitted I couldn't find my passport anywhere. That's when Susan tossed something on my bed. It was my passport. Or at least what was left of it. Half burned, charred along the edges, completely ruined. She smirked and asked, "Was this what you were looking for?" I froze. My brain couldn't even process it at first. When the shock finally wore off, I decided I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of watching me break down. I calmly set the ruined passport aside, stood up, shut the door in their faces, locked it, and then I collapsed into tears. Dad wasn't home. He was out picking up clothes for the trip. I texted him everything that happened, even attached a photo of the burned passport.
Within 20 minutes, I heard him storming into the house. His voice shook the walls as he screamed at Susan and Nadia, calling them psychos and ordering them out. He said he'd already made one mistake when he ignored the first time they mistreated me, and he wasn't about to repeat it just because he once loved Susan. Of course, they immediately tried to fake cry and blame me. Their story? That I'd supposedly left a lit cigarette on my dresser, and that's how my passport caught fire. Which is insane. I don't even smoke. At that point, I came downstairs because I couldn't let them spin lies like that. Dad looked at me and said I was just in time because he had something planned. I assumed he was about to call the police, but no. He went into his office and came back with a stack of papers. Nadia's face went pale the second she saw them. Then, without saying a word, Dad ripped the documents in half right in front of Susan. Turns out those papers were for Nadia's student loan. She needed Dad to co-sign so she could pay for college since Susan hadn't saved a dime for her. Dad had been ready to help, not anymore. That was his revenge. My passport for her college dream. Fair trade, honestly. Within an hour, Susan and Nadia were gone. They begged, pleaded, even got on their knees, but Dad didn't budge. Now, since the moment they left, they've been spamming me with texts. Nadia especially. She keeps begging me to convince Dad to reconsider, promising she'll do anything to make up for it. She claims they never knew Dad was going to co-sign her loan, and that they just lashed out because they felt excluded. I finally replied once. I reminded them that they've gone on plenty of mother-daughter trips without us, so why is it unfair when Dad and I wanted one international trip with Dad, without my stepmother and stepsister? Their getaways usually last only 2 to 3 days, somewhere nearby, while ours was supposed to be 10 full days in India. That's a big difference. So here I am asking, am I really the bad guy for wanting one international trip with my dad without my stepmother and stepsister? Well, before I continue, I'll just say what I think the answer is. No, not at all. This situation seems clear. I wasn't wrong. I wanted time with my dad, especially on my 18th birthday, and especially since it was in honor of my late mom. What Susan and Nadia did was cruel and manipulative, and it says more about them than about me. My dad, he's the one I feel bad for. He fell for a woman who clearly didn't respect me, and by extension, didn't really love him the way she should have.
Update 2. A lot of people asked why we didn't call the cops after they destroyed my passport. The truth? It didn't even cross my mind at first. I was in shock, panicking, crying. And honestly, what would it have done? They would have just claimed it was an accident, dragged it out forever, and nothing would change. We didn't want that mess. Others also asked why I wasn't in college yet. I graduated high school last year and decided to take a gap year to figure myself out. I worked a few jobs, interned in journalism, and gained some experience in the field I want to study. Now I'm applying to schools, and luckily my grandparents have already promised to cover my tuition, so my dad doesn't have to stress about me. Nadia's situation was completely different, which is why Dad was planning to co-sign her student loan. But after what happened, well, you already know how that ended. As for our trip, today was supposed to be our flight to India. Instead, we stayed home and watched old movies we used to love. It wasn't the same, but honestly, it helped. I finally blocked both Susan and Nadia, and I don't regret it. They don't deserve my sympathy. You were all right. I was only second-guessing myself because I'd been missing my mom and was in a very emotional state. But they betrayed me for no reason, and whatever happens to them now, they absolutely brought on themselves. Update 3. It's been 4 days since my last post, and today Dad came home from work with big news. He filed for divorce. Afterward, we finally had the conversation we'd been avoiding for far too long. He admitted that he'd been selfish. He loved Susan and tried to convince himself it would work out, even when her behavior, and Nadia's, clearly proved otherwise. Instead of trying to repair things with me, they simply shut me out completely.
That's not family. That's not love. Dad told me he finally realized he'd been clinging to something toxic and that it was damaging both of us. He deserves better. I deserve better. Maybe he did love her, but it was obvious she didn't love him enough to even tolerate me, and that's not the kind of woman he should spend his life with. Update 3. The reason Susan never truly accepted me was simple. She could never see me as part of her family. Deep down, she probably knew that for Dad, I would always come first, and that neither she nor Nadia could ever replace me. That jealousy and insecurity made her bitter, and eventually it poisoned everything. Dad may never fully understand why their behavior shifted so dramatically, because before the wedding they treated me kindly, but the moment the vows were said, it's like they became different people overnight. Dad admitted he ignored the signs, hoping things would somehow settle, but the damage was already done. He told me he's finished pretending. We're not a happy family, and there's no point acting like one. That same day, after meeting with his lawyer, he filed for divorce. Later, he apologized for everything I'd had to endure because of his choices, and we just hugged. Some might call him a flawed father, but to me, he's the best dad I could ever ask for. Sure, he made mistakes and sometimes thought only of himself, but every mistake was outweighed by 10 good things he did for me. I love him, and I always will. Update 4. A few days later, it became official. Susan was served divorce papers. Dad came home early from work and locked himself in his office. I could hear him shouting into the phone, and it had me worried. Hours later, he finally explained. Susan had called, threatening to ruin him if he went through with the divorce. She promised to spread lies, throw accusations, and destroy his reputation. The first time she caught him off guard at work, but once he was home, he recorded the call. When she realized he had proof, she flipped out, accused him of blackmail, and turned the whole thing into chaos. Dad didn't back down. He told her if she tried to drag his name through the mud, he'd make sure she would regret it. From her voice, he could tell she was shaken. He said the process will start soon, and once it's finalized, he and I will finally take that trip to India together. He promised me. For now, we just hope she doesn't create more problems. But honestly, with the evidence I have, including the destroyed passport, she knows she's fighting a losing battle. Update 5. Hi again, quick update because I'm super busy. The divorce is officially finalized, and the outcome? Honestly, Dad hit the jackpot. Susan walked away with nothing. No alimony, no settlement, no ridiculous child support she tried to claim out of nowhere. She fought dirty, but it didn't work. So now it's just us. We kept everything, and for the first time in a long time, life feels calm. I already have my new passport, and Dad and I have started planning our India trip again. This time, it's really happening. I can't even describe how excited I am. More importantly, I'm genuinely happy now. Thank you all for your support along the way.
Many years ago, my wife's grandfather found an unusual bag of seeds in the Ozark Mountains of Missouri. The discovery was made near Roaring River Park in the southwestern part of the state. The bag was lying on top of a hill and looked remarkably well preserved. Although it had likely been exposed to the elements for a long time, there were no visible signs of damage or stains. The material proved to be strong and flexible. When at rest, the bag looked slightly wrinkled, but it could still be opened and closed. Out of caution, the find was barely touched, limited to just a few photographs. Inside, there were several hundred seeds of at least 2 different species. Such discoveries are extremely rare. Only one similar artifact is known, a bag of seeds kept at the University of Arkansas. It also contains seeds of ancient plants, ancestors of which still grow in this region today. Interestingly, both bags were found approximately 80 kilometers apart. Later, the owners contacted the university and arranged to transfer the find for research. Over time, more details about the artifact's origin came to light.
In fact, the bag had been discovered back in the mid-1960s by two men, Jerry Weber and Andy Jewell. Andy had worked for many years as a surveyor for the railroad, farmed, and spent most of his life outdoors. After the discovery, the bag was placed in a glass jar where it remained for about 65 years. Over time, some of the information about the circumstances of the find was lost as Andy Jewell passed away in the early 2000s. Later, relatives were able to recover some details. It turned out the bag was not found simply in the open, but on a rock ledge inside a small grotto on the hillside. In the same area, Andy had found other ancient items, stone tools, and arrowheads. All of these discoveries were kept together for many years. It is likely that the find site was located in Berry County, near Roaring River Park. Andy lived in the Dry Hollow area between the towns of Cassville and Seligman, and the bag may have been found near the Washburn Prairie. Pinpointing the exact location is difficult now, as most people directly involved in the story have passed away. Gathering all the available information and the old artifacts, the family decided to show the find to experts and brought it to the University of Arkansas Museum. The bag was placed in a special storage room in the museum collection, a controlled environment where archaeological artifacts are preserved. The museum curator, Dr. Mary Suter, carefully laid out the bag, seeds, and stone tools for inspection. After the initial examination, she retrieved a scientific book about woven artifacts found in rock shelters of the Ozark Mountains. As she flipped through the pages, she came across an illustration of a bag that matched almost perfectly in weave, color, and construction with the new find. The news quickly spread among museum staff, and other specialists began arriving in the room. Many noted that such artifacts are extremely rare. Archaeologists explained that rock grottos and natural shelters were often used by the region's ancient inhabitants to store items and supplies. These are precisely the kinds of locations where organic materials, which normally decompose quickly, might sometimes survive. According to preliminary assessments, the bag belongs to the pre-contact period, the time before Europeans arrived in North America. Its exact age is still unknown, but it can be confidently stated that it is at least 500 years old and likely much older. To determine a more precise age, radiocarbon dating will be needed. Since the artifact is linked to the cultural heritage of native peoples, the museum must coordinate with the Osage tribe before conducting research. Afterward, samples can be sent to another university for laboratory analysis. For now, the bag, seeds, and other items remain at the University of Arkansas Museum, where they are being preserved under appropriate conditions and studied by archaeologists. Seed bags like this are considered exceptionally rare finds. Before this discovery, archaeologists knew of only two similar bags, from Eden Bluff and another heavily damaged one that contained acorns. Organic materials, such as plant fibers and seeds, usually decompose quickly, so their preservation over hundreds or even thousands of years is highly unusual. Museum specialists immediately began photographing the seeds and stone items to share with other researchers. One of the small black seeds initially puzzled the scientists, but after discussion, they concluded that all of the seeds are very old and no longer viable for germination. Along with the bag, the family also donated several stone tools and arrowheads that Andy Jewell had found. Archaeologist Jared Piard, who specializes in ancient stone implements, quickly determined that these items belong to two different archaeological periods. Some date back to the Middle Archaic period, roughly 2000 to 5000 BCE, and others are from the Woodland Culture period, spanning approximately the 1st millennium BCE to the 1st millennium AD. However, these finds can only indirectly help in dating the bag, since it's unclear which of these items were originally found with it. After the preliminary inspection, Dr. Mary Suter decided to show another similar artifact from the museum collection.
She led the guests deeper into the storage area, which houses thousands of archaeological artifacts. Among the many shelves with cataloged boxes, she found a collection from excavations conducted in 1932. The box contained various ancient items, shells, bones, fragments of cords, and other objects. Among them was a bag that proved to be almost identical in weave, color, and construction with the new find. It was a little larger, but far more deteriorated. The material was heavily damaged and bound with a piece of leather. Inside, the excavation had uncovered only half of an old carved pipe. Interestingly, this bag was also found in Barry County, Missouri, just a few kilometers from the location where Andy Jewell found his find. Unfortunately, the 1932 artifact has never been radiocarbon dated, so its precise age remains unknown. Next, the researchers showed another famous specimen, the renowned Eden Bluff seed bag. It is approximately 2,000 years old, but is so well preserved that it appears almost new. Examining the museum collection, you could see a vast number of archaeological finds associated with the ancient inhabitants of the Ozarks. The storage houses ceramics, tools, jewelry, and other items that help researchers reconstruct the history of the region. After all the research, the family decided to formally donate the discovered bag to the University of Arkansas Museum. The artifact was formally handed over to the Osage tribe, considered the custodian of many cultural treasures of the region's native peoples. The museum itself is responsible for preserving and scientifically studying such artifacts. The bag was placed in a specialized storage unit with stable temperature and humidity. Under these conditions, the artifact can be preserved for decades and remain accessible for research. The family had long worried whether they could properly preserve such an ancient and valuable item. In the museum, it is now under expert supervision, ensuring not only proper storage conditions, but also continued scientific study. Researchers emphasize that archaeological artifacts are of immense importance for understanding history. That is why, when such items are found, it is recommended to leave them in place and notify specialists who can properly document and study the discovery. The story of this bag ended positively. It is now in a secure location where scientists can study it, and the find will help provide a better understanding of the lives of people who lived in this region centuries ago. In the future, radiocarbon dating of the seeds and a detailed analysis of the bag's material are planned. Once these studies are complete, more will be known about its exact age and origin.
I ruined my ex-boyfriend's life over 20 years ago, and I just made sure it stays that way. When I was in college in the 90s, I met Jake through mutual friends. He was 23 at the time. He had already graduated and was planning to move across the country to pursue graduate school. I was also planning a move, with friends, to a city just an hour and a half away from where he was going. We had a lot in common. We fell in love, and it felt like fate. Both of us planning to move 4,000 kilometers, and almost to the same place. Jake had 2 sisters and a younger brother. They were all great people, and I got along with them right away. Since Jake was in grad school and I was working, I usually visited him on weekends. He rented a house with 2 roommates from his program. We were young, didn't have much money, but we had fun. We went on cheap dates and spent a lot of time at home. Jake bred and sold small animals. It was part of his studies. He was studying animal science, so being surrounded by animals was normal for him, and honestly, I didn't mind it. I met the wife of his academic advisor, Mary. She was around 50 and worked in the university administration. A wonderful woman. We often had lunch together when I visited. In fact, I connected with people from his program even more easily than he did. But about 2 years into the relationship, something strange happened. One day we were lying in bed at his place, partially undressed, and he suddenly said that he was bothered by the fact that I had gained weight.
and that it was becoming harder for him to feel attracted to me. Not a word about health, just that he found me less attractive. I sat up and calmly replied, "Maybe you should make sure I have proper food when I visit you instead of just crackers and cheese." I had gained maybe 4 kilograms since we met. I wore the same clothing size, and even at 23, I wasn't going to tolerate that kind of nonsense. I didn't argue. It was his problem, not mine. So I just asked, "So what's your solution?" He looked me blankly and said, "I think you should try to lose weight." I replied, "No, I'm not going to do that. So what are you going to do?" He said, "Probably nothing. I just wanted to tell you how I feel." "Great, thanks." I got dressed, went to sleep, and left the next day like usual. We kept dating. But about 3 months later, he called and said he wanted to break up after nearly 3 years together. The reason? And I quote, "You're not scientific enough." I thought, what kind of nonsense is that? He seriously claimed that he couldn't talk to me about his work without using scientific animal terminology. I said, "That's ridiculous. What's the real reason?" But he insisted that was the reason. A month later, he came to return my things, and I made him tell the truth. Eventually, he gave in. It turned out he had been seeing one of his students. Let's call her Mac. She was 19, he was 26, and he was her instructor. I exploded. I yelled at him to get out. My roommate even threatened to throw him off the 2nd floor if he didn't leave, and he left. As soon as the door closed behind him, I broke down, from rage to hysterical laughter. I had seen Mac before, and suddenly it all clicked. At a barbecue at his place once, she had spilled something on her pants. Jake asked if I could lend her a pair of sweatpants. I couldn't. I wore a size 44-46, and she was significantly bigger. And suddenly everything made sense. His comment about my weight was never about me. He just wanted me to break up with him because he was a coward. He liked a completely different type of girl, but didn't have the courage to say it. But you know what really got to me? He said it at night, when I was 150 kilometers from home, after we had been intimate. Did he really think I would just snap, turn around, and drive home in the middle of the night? After that, I messaged his roommates. I thanked them for everything and told them we had broken up. And they already knew. They said they had demanded he tell me the truth. Otherwise, they would have told me themselves. That's why he came up with that nonsense about me not being scientific enough. One of the roommates, George, was a very sweet and attractive guy. He offered to bring my things over and said, "Come over this weekend. We'll have some drinks, relax." The kind of thing Jake never wanted to spend money on. I agreed. I came over. Jake wasn't home. George let me in. And that's when things got interesting. I started taking photos of all his animals because I knew one important thing. He had an animal that was on the endangered species list, and you couldn't legally keep it without a permit. All he had to do was file paperwork and pay $25, but he always said, "I don't want the government in my business." I photographed everything, the conditions, the cages, and another animal that was completely illegal to keep in that state. It was right by the window, visible from the street. Then George and I went into town. We got back around midnight, and we made sure Jake and Max saw us. Me in a short dress, a little drunk, George almost carrying me. We were loud on purpose, laughing, joking, even pretending there was something going on between us so they could hear. I spent the night in George's room. He behaved like a gentleman, but a few times walked out into the hallway just in his boxers. Pure coincidence, of course. In the morning, as I was leaving, Jake said, "You don't have to act like a..." I slowly ate a donut in a wrinkled dress with messy hair. George kissed me on the top of my head. Max sat there, not knowing where to look. I smiled and said, "Enjoy my leftovers," and left. At the time, I thought that was my revenge. But no, that was just the beginning. The next day, I developed the film. Yes, the good old days, and immediately called the Department of Natural Resources. I reported everything: the animals, the conditions, the overcrowding, and especially the two that were illegal to keep in that state. I simply asked how to properly file a report, and then I did.
I destroyed my ex-boyfriend's life more than 20 years ago, and I just made sure it stays that way. As it turned out, Jake wasn't liked. Not by his classmates, not even by his own roommates. But me? People liked me. George and another roommate decided to take things further. They filed a complaint with the university about a teaching assistant who was sleeping with his student and giving her preferential treatment. That same night we went bar hopping. They told the story to everyone they knew. The program was small, and the news spread fast. I made another move, too. I called Mary, his advisor's wife, and I told her directly. He admitted himself that he's sleeping with a student. I even had his emails where he confirmed it. I sent them to her. Mary was furious. She immediately passed everything to her husband, Jake's advisor. And then it all started. A couple of weeks later, George calls me, emotional. "They're here, inspectors. They're taking the animals." Mac was at home, and trying to save the situation, she said, "All the animals belong to Jake." That automatically cleared the roommates of responsibility. The inspectors knew exactly where to look. They were tipped off about the back window, where the most problematic animal was, the one that was almost never legal to keep. Since George was on the lease, he had the right to let them in. All the animals were kept in shared spaces. The inspectors worked for several hours. Then they came back with a warrant. They took all the animals and searched Jake's room. The only thing they left were a few guppies in a tank. Now, the most painful part for him. Graduate students live off grants, and he had just received a federal grant around the time we broke up. I called them and simply asked, "How do I report that someone with a federal grant is under investigation for illegal animal possession?" The result? He lost the grant and had to pay back nearly $30,000. He will never be able to get federal funding again. He wasn't jailed. The animals were in decent condition, but he lost all his animals, paid about $15,000 in fines. 2 animals were transferred to a wildlife center. The university didn't stay out of it either. He lost his stipend, was fired from teaching, essentially had his academic career destroyed, and all because of one thing. He was sleeping with a student. He couldn't even wait 4 weeks until the end of the course when it would have been technically allowed. His arrogance destroyed him. A few months later, I wrote to his sisters, told them I missed them. They replied and told me he had lied to the family, said I broke up with him because of distance. I just forwarded him his own email where he said he had fallen in love with Mac. And that settled everything. I moved on, finished my studies, built a career. And you know what I do now? I help scientists and doctors explain complex things in simple terms. Ironic, right? And him? He married Mac, 2 kids, went back to breeding animals. 20 years passed, and one day I'm giving a lecture at a university, 250 people in the room. And suddenly I hear, "Hey, long time no see." I turn around. It's him, Jake. I pretended I didn't recognize him. "Sorry, do I know you?" He said, "It's me, Jake."
I paused and said, "Ah, I guess my memory just erased you," and walked away. Later, I found out he was there for a job interview for a teaching position. They were seriously considering hiring him. And then I said just one sentence. "It's strange he's still teaching after what happened at University X." That was enough. They checked and found everything. The scandal with the student, the lost grant, the investigation, the old complaints. And you know what? He didn't get the job. Karma. Sometimes it works perfectly. And my conclusion? If the person who's supposed to love you humiliates you because of your appearance, the problem isn't you. The problem is them.
My boss demoted me, but still expected me to work just as hard as before. This happened a couple of years ago, but first I need to give a little background to set the scene. I grew up in a pretty poor family in the southern US. Despite that, I studied like crazy and earned a full scholarship to one of the top universities in the country, maybe even the world. I'm not trying to brag, it's just the truth. I realized early on that I absorb information fast, and it helps me work efficiently. And thanks to years spent collecting cans for money and working outside with my dad all day, I developed stubborn persistence and a strong work ethic. Being the oldest of 6 children, growing up in poverty also taught me to read people, their intentions, small cues, everything between the lines. In short, I was practically built for malicious compliance. After graduating from a great university, I moved back home to be close to my family and start my career. I also didn't care much for the Northeast, where my university was. It felt too gray and cold to me. I started with a crappy job just to get my foot in the door, then briefly worked at a startup. Eventually, I landed a position at a local government agency, earning almost double what I made before. The agency, well, specifically our county office, was notorious for insane turnover, awful coworkers, and an overall toxic and exhausting environment. Add to that the clients, who were often some of the most difficult people in the community, and the job drained every ounce of energy a person could have. But for a young guy, the salary felt good enough to deal with the pain. So when they offered me the job, I accepted, as cheerfully as someone can when walking straight into hell. I started in May. I worked my butt off from day one. I read the entire 350-page manual in my free time. I took on unpaid side tasks. I helped coworkers, even if it meant working more hours than I could handle. Sometimes I'd show up at 8 a.m. and wouldn't leave until 2 or 3 in the morning. I once had to cancel a long-planned date with my serious girlfriend because they called me in unexpectedly, and I stayed until late at night. I consistently worked far more than I wanted, but they just kept piling on work because I was performing well. My supervisor would always say things like, "That's just how things are here. It's for the good of the agency. The best employees are the ones who sacrifice themselves for everyone else." Outside of work, she seemed like a perfectly pleasant woman, but a small part of me grew more irritated every time I heard those lines. By June, only 1 month in, I was already looking for escape routes, just like all the talented people who quit before me. I reached out to an MBA program that had always interested me, and they told me I should apply. Within a couple of days, the program director contacted me personally and scheduled an interview. The interview lasted 15 minutes. He thanked me for my time and ended the Skype call. Before the week was over, I received an email offering me a full ride scholarship plus a small but very useful monthly stipend as long as I agreed to work as a graduate assistant for 20 hours a week during semesters. I was thrilled and signed the acceptance document immediately. Just like that, in under a week, I went from drowning under a growing mountain of stress to becoming a future graduate student. The program began in January, which gave me about 5 months. I decided I'd stick it out at the agency, save as much money as possible, and then leave in December. Since I'm an honest person, I told my supervisor about my plans and explained that I'd be resigning at the end of December because I'd been given an incredible MBA opportunity. She congratulated me, said she was glad for my success, and told me she'd think about the next steps and get back to me soon. A couple of weeks passed, each day draining me a little more, like a river slowly eroding its banks. Finally, she called me into her office for a meeting. She told me I could stay with the agency, but only if I agreed to move into what she called a contract position. She said they needed me to vacate my current role so they could open it as an official vacancy and prepare it for a new hire.
She insisted that all of this was for the good of the agency, and that someone as principled, hardworking, and ethical as me would agree to such terms, and should agree to them. Remember those words, because they'll matter later. I asked what exactly would change, and she gave me a vague summary. That wasn't enough for me. She wasn't a terrible manager, but life taught me one rule: never sign anything unless you've personally read every line. So I requested a week to decide and asked for all documents detailing every change, benefits, duties, restrictions, everything. She promised to bring the paperwork the next day. And that's where the malicious compliance began. The following afternoon, she handed me 12 double-sided pages packed with text. Every page was filled with size 10 times New Roman, the kind of formatting that makes sentences blend into each other like wet ink. Even the most dedicated reader would fall asleep halfway through it. I read the packet that night, and with each page, my mood sank lower and lower. I was losing nearly every benefit except my accumulated overtime. My title was being reduced. Several privileges I had earned were simply gone. But halfway through, something changed. I suddenly sat up. I had found a tiny clause buried deep in legal sludge stating that under this new contract, I could not work more than 40 hours a week. I was forbidden from performing many of the tasks I had grown to despise. I was required to do only the duties explicitly listed in the new job description. In other words, once I hit 40 hours, I was done. No exceptions, no pitching in, no being a team player. As I reread that microscopic sentence, a slow smile crept across my face. At first it was small, the polite "I'm pretending to be interested" smile you give on a bad date. Then it grew wider and wider until I probably resembled the Grinch plotting to steal Christmas. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was so energized I barely slept. The next morning, I walked into the office prepared. My manager was delighted to hear I accepted the new contract. Of course, she had no idea how happy I actually was. After I handed her the signed pages, she began explaining what she wanted me to handle over the next 2 weeks. I quickly, but calmly, told her I wouldn't be able to do that. I explained that as a responsible and ethical employee, I must strictly follow my new contract. She stared at me, confusion mixing with anger, as I laid it all out. I could no longer perform several tasks I used to because the contract prohibited them. I could not work overtime under any circumstances unless my hours were officially recorded. Once I reached 40 hours, I was required to stop working immediately and go home. After-hours calls, emails, and messages, not allowed. Everything would have to wait until Monday at 8 a.m. I was no longer permitted to take on call shifts. They'd need to find someone else fast, which would be, challenging. I couldn't help coworkers the way I used to because I no longer had the authority, the time, or the legal right to do so. Her stare could have melted steel, and the longer I continued, the more intense it became. When I left her office, which was now seconds away from metaphorically exploding, I sat down and began drafting an email. Here's the thing. In my old position, you needed certified training before you were legally allowed to sign off on cases and documents. If you hadn't completed that training and anyone found out, attorneys could tear the agency apart. Because of the county's incompetence, I never got that training, yet they still had me doing a job from day one. Every request I made about it had been ignored. So I wrote the email. I addressed it to my former supervisor, the office manager, and the regional director, the usual trio who had ignored me before. But this time, I added 2 more recipients in the blind copy, the big boss from the central office and her even bigger boss. Networking and politeness, I practice them religiously. They pay off when it counts. I asked very respectfully,
when I would finally receive the mandatory training I had been promised months ago. I explained that I had been handling cases without the required certification and would have to continue doing so until my responsibilities were reassigned. 2 minutes later, I received a reply from the highest-ranking official in the entire state agency.
She expressed that she was saddened and disturbed to hear about my situation and promised she would personally ensure I completed the required training. She was also shocked that I had essentially been forced to accept a demotion just to keep my job. As a result, she guaranteed that under no circumstances would my salary be reduced. The most amusing part? I was being trained for a position I no longer held, so the whole exercise was absurd in itself. On top of that, the standard training sessions weren't even being offered at that time. This meant I had to travel to the state capitol for a special session, just me and a handful of other lucky employees from across the state. Since the capitol was far from home, company policy required that they provide a hotel room and a reasonable per diem. Thanks to some late-night research, I discovered that the city was hosting major events at the same time. I reported this to the big boss from the central office, explaining that no reasonably priced rooms were available near the training site. That would have been a contract violation on their part. Now it was their responsibility to find accommodation for me. In the end, the big boss exercised her authority and booked me a luxury suite in a stunning hotel, a pinnacle of cosmopolitan glamour, at least by local standards. The following week, I went to the week-long training. Let me remind you, this was for a job I no longer held and had no intention of ever doing again. My motivation, naturally, was minimal. The entire week, I did nothing but enjoy the luxury suite, expensive meals, and a couple of fun events in the city. In effect, I received a fully paid week off, even though I technically no longer had benefits. Returning to the office, I noticed that 2 coworkers from my department had quit, along with several others across the office. Chaos reigned largely because my letter from 2 weeks earlier had finally reached the central big boss. She had dug in, realized how badly our office was running, and acted swiftly and ruthlessly. She dropped the full weight of bureaucratic authority, and the office felt it. Thanks to my new contract status, I was required to do only what was explicitly stated in it. Due to office incompetence, I could complete all my assigned tasks in about 20 hours a week. Plus, with the chaos caused by coworkers being sent to training, I was often tasked with simply transporting items from one location to another, sometimes across the state. I was slightly annoyed that this distracted me from core duties, but of course I was willing to sacrifice myself for the agency. It allowed me to easily rack up hours, sometimes working 16-hour days doing almost nothing and getting paid for the mileage. I would sit at my desk, headphones on, quietly watching the world burn around me. My office life until my departure was simple: handle minor tasks, then do absolutely nothing, browse the internet, watch YouTube, etc., until I reached 40 hours for the week. Often I could leave for the weekend by Wednesday afternoon or Thursday morning. My life had shifted from a nightmare to a balanced existence. I began enjoying life again, spending time with my girlfriend, playing video games, and pursuing hobbies. I even used accumulated overtime to pay for a Caribbean cruise in November, which I was thrilled about because many childhood friends were going. My once formidable, now comparatively humble boss quietly wished me a good vacation and expressed hope I'd return. I joked that I couldn't promise anything. I enjoyed a week in warm waters and on the islands, experienced the pleasure of cruising like a pro, and reflected on what I wanted from life, work, and myself. Back at the office on Monday, I waited for my boss. When she entered, she already knew what I would say. I could see the joy drain from her face, leaving only a hollow shell. I informed her that, unfortunately, I couldn't stay until the end of December. I needed to leave 2 weeks early due to unforeseen complications in my transition to the MBA program. She replied with a weary, strained tone, "I understand. Thank you for your 6 months of service. I'm sorry to see you go." And that's how I turned a demotion into a fully paid week off and nearly 4 months of easy work. Moreover, I turned her words against her, becoming the model ethical employee, strictly following my contract while creating office chaos for weeks as management scrambled to handle the attention from the central leadership. Recently, I discussed this story with my current girlfriend, whom I met at that very agency. She's amazing and makes me happier than I've ever been. I'm fairly certain I'll propose eventually. She mentioned that both my previous bosses, as well as the office manager and regional director, were eventually removed from their positions, enforced by the central big boss, shortly after my departure. For those curious, I completed my MBA program with a perfect GPA, 4.0. Next week, I have an interview for a new position. Looks like I'll nearly double my income again.
I nearly lost $900,000 during my divorce, but instead, I destroyed my cheating wife in court with shocking evidence. I work as an elementary school teacher, so my daily routine is very predictable. I have fixed hours at school, and every Tuesday, we usually had staff meetings that ended around 6 p.m. That meant I normally got home by 7. My wife, Terry, whom I had been married to for over 30 years, would go to the gym every Tuesday evening. She always came back exhausted, so I usually prepared dinner while she showered and handled the house chores. But one day, my principal surprised us by canceling the meeting. It was only 3:30 p.m., and I thought it would be a great idea to head home early, cook dinner, and maybe catch up on some household tasks. Lately, I'd noticed Terry becoming more distant, and I hoped a candlelit dinner might help rekindle some spark between us. Our marriage had been strained by financial troubles, and I could feel her pulling away more and more. She wanted to control everything, and if things didn't go her way, she would become stubborn and irritable. I always thought of myself as patient, but it was starting to wear me down. When I got home, I noticed her car in the garage. That was strange because she usually took the bus to the gym. I slipped in quietly through the back door. The first thing I saw was her purse sitting on the kitchen counter. Terry was always meticulous about where she placed her things, so this was odd. Then I noticed her workout clothes and a large towel on the floor. Just as confusion set in, I heard noises coming upstairs. My first thought was that she might not be feeling well, so I cautiously started up the stairs. That's when I stumbled over a pair of men's shoes. Scattered on the steps were pants, a shirt, socks, and worst of all, Terry's lingerie, the kind she only wore for anniversaries or special nights. My blood ran cold. I froze on the stairs, heart pounding, stomach turning. For a moment, I might faint. I sat down, trembling. Then anger began to boil inside me, an emotion I rarely allowed to take control. Years of teaching had given me patience, but this was beyond anything I could manage. I moved quietly toward the bedroom. To reach it, you had to pass through the walk-in closet. The door was cracked open just enough for me to see inside. And there it was, my wife, my partner of 3 decades, the mother of our children, betraying me in our own bed. I pulled out my phone and hit record. I knew I would need proof, not just for myself, but for the storm that was about to follow. Watching it unfold before my eyes was like living through a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Terry, the woman who claimed to love me, who volunteered at charities, who acted like the perfect wife, was now just another liar. I couldn't watch anymore. I stopped recording, slipped out of the house, and just walked aimlessly. Eventually, I ended up in a park miles away. I sat on a bench, splashed some water on my face, and played the video back. The sound was low so nearby kids wouldn't hear, but on that screen was the collapse of my marriage, my family, my entire life. And there in the park, I broke down and cried. By the time I got back home, it was around 7 p.m., my usual return time on meeting days. Terry greeted me at the back door with fake concern. "Honey, are you okay? You look so pale. What happened? Do you want me to get you something to drink?" Her eyes were full of feigned worry, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. My voice shook as I muttered, "Not really. I think it's just my stomach. I'm going to take a shower and sleep it off." "All right, but take a bucket in case you throw up. I don't want to ruin the clean sheets," she said casually. That almost broke me. Those clean sheets had already been ruined, stained by betrayal. I replied more firmly, "I'll sleep in the guest room tonight." And that's exactly what I did. For the next few days, I pretended to be unwell. She went on with life as if nothing had happened, while I carried the weight of the recording in my pocket, the evidence that my marriage was nothing but ashes. When Monday came, I finally decided what to do next. I needed answers. Was this just a one-time betrayal, or had it been going on for a while? The next morning, I told the school principal that I had to undergo an unexpected medical procedure and wouldn't be able to teach for a few days. A substitute was arranged, which gave me the freedom I needed. On Tuesday, I left home as usual, but parked several streets away, then walked back quietly, cutting through neighbors' yards. I knew all the back routes and moved carefully so no one would notice me. I slipped into our detached garage and changed into casual clothes and soft shoes to keep silent. Then came the waiting. I remembered that the last time I'd come home early, there hadn't been any strange cars parked outside. That meant her lover probably came on foot. I crouched behind the hedge and bushes near our front entrance, hidden but with a clear view of the door. Terry carried on her morning as if everything was normal. Washing dishes, starting the dishwasher, vacuuming, dusting. Around 11:30, she went upstairs. I heard the shower running, followed by the toilet flushing. After about 45 minutes, she came back down and left the front door slightly open, an unspoken invitation for her guest. It didn't take long. Around 1:30, he showed up. I didn't know who he was at first, but I managed to capture about 10 seconds of video on my phone. It showed his side profile and almost a clear shot of his face. He didn't hesitate, he just walked straight into my house. The first words I heard froze me in place. "I hope you're wearing that workout outfit again." "Of course," Terry replied with a giggle. "You always loved when I put it on. Sometimes I think that's what hooked you in the first place." That was all I needed. Their comfort with each other screamed of a long-term affair. They headed upstairs without a care in the world. I returned to the garage, my heart pounding out of my chest. My head was spinning with questions. Who was this man? How long had this been going on? And why hadn't she ever talked to me about anything? What terrified me more was the thought of my health. They hadn't used protection, at least not that I could see. The idea that she might have put me at risk made my stomach churn. I thought back to her years at the gym, the social circle of married women she had joined, and the charity events. Maybe the gym held the answers.
Update 1. Being a teacher came with one big advantage. I had access to printers and other resources. I decided to start by printing still frames from the video I had taken. Identifying him was now my top priority. On Thursday, when Terry was supposed to go to the gym again, I suggested going with her. I claimed I was thinking about getting a membership myself, especially since school was on break. She immediately grew uncomfortable and tried to talk me out of it. "It's really just a group of wives who chat more than work out," she insisted. But I didn't budge. So that Thursday, I walked into the gym with her. The moment I stepped inside, it felt like a scene from an old Western. Everyone turned to stare at me, whispering among themselves. Terry was visibly on edge, sneaking nervous glances toward the staff area. I tried to distract myself by walking around the facility. It was the usual setup, rows of machines, mirrors on the walls. Near the exit, I noticed a staff board with photos and contact info. At the top was the owner and director, Ms. Elizabeth West, followed by 2 women and 1 man. My blood went cold. The man was him, the lover. Under his photo, Philip Barnes, head of training programs, personal coach. As I memorized his number, I looked back toward the machines. Terry was gone. Panic struck me until I spotted her a few minutes later in a hushed but desperate conversation with none other than Philip. She stood partly hidden behind weight equipment, gesturing for him to leave. Then she quickly returned to her machine as if nothing had happened. She didn't realize I'd seen it all. I sat there, burning with rage, trying to keep my composure. When she came back over, she noticed my pale face and asked softly, "Are you okay? Is your blood sugar still low?" "I'm fine now."
Are you ready to leave?" Before she could answer, the director's voice echoed through the loudspeaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, the last training session of the day is canceled. Mr. Barnes suddenly felt unwell and had to go home." A wave of disappointment swept through the women in the gym. But I wasn't disappointed. For me, it only confirmed everything. Update 2. It seemed that workouts with Mr. Bont were a cornerstone for many women at that gym. That alone made me think this needed deeper investigation. When I glanced at Terry, she didn't show much reaction to the announcement of his sudden illness, but I could swear I saw her shoulders relax, as if a huge weight had been lifted. "Let's go," she said quickly, snatching her towel and gym bag from the storage area where everyone left their things during class. We were just stepping out when a woman approached us, someone I didn't immediately recognize. "Such a shame we couldn't finish today's session properly," she commented to Terry. Terry gave a brief "agreed" and headed toward the car, clearly signaling that she had no interest in chatting further. "See you later," she tossed over her shoulder before sliding into the car faster than I'd ever seen her move. The ride home was silent. Terry leaned her head back, closed her eyes, and deliberately slowed her breathing as though calming herself. She looked serene, almost too serene, and I couldn't help but think maybe I could use this relaxed moment to probe deeper. "That was a pretty interesting workout, dear. The place is really well equipped. No wonder you've stayed so toned all these years." "Thanks, honey," she replied softly. "You're absolutely right. The program's great, and I enjoy being there. The women are friendly, too. Too bad Mr. Bont wasn't around today." She caught herself too quickly, correcting, Philip Bont. He usually finishes every session with those tough exercises that really push us to the limit. It's always disappointing when he's not around. Inside, my stomach twisted. I knew all too well how far he had been pushing her body, but outwardly I only muttered, maybe he'll be better by next Thursday. The thought of their next intimate encounter made me sick, but I shoved it down. The following week, I had playground duty at school during pickup time. For those unfamiliar, it's chaos. Kids rushing out, chatting with friends, scanning for parents, while we teachers try to keep order until each child is collected. Near the end of pickup, a car pulled up, and I instantly recognized the driver. It was the same woman who had tried speaking to Terry in the gym. "Hello," she said nervously. "Sorry, I'm new to all this and lost track of the time. My son Timothy's here, right?" That wasn't unusual. New parents often struggled with pickup procedures. I reassured her I'd get Timothy, while colleagues covered the remaining kids. I found him near his classroom, chatting with another student. "Hey, Tim, your mom's here. Let's head to the pickup area." He looked puzzled. He was in the last year of elementary school, old enough to not lose track of time. "That's weird," he muttered. "Mom's usually busy with her fitness instructor on Friday afternoons. Back at my old school, she often didn't come until 5:30. The word fitness instructor hit me like a hammer. My heart pounded as I casually asked, "Oh, that's great she takes care of her health. Do you happen to know his name?" "Yeah, it's Bont or something like that. He works at the local gym but also does private lessons at home. That's who I want to be when I grow up. Mom always seems so happy and relaxed after training with him. We usually order takeout on Fridays because she doesn't have time to cook." I nearly lost my composure. This man wasn't just entangled with my wife. He was messing around with multiple women in town. Back at the car, his mother thanked me warmly for helping. "Not a problem," I said smoothly. "Part of the job. By the way, I don't think we've officially met. I'm Gerard D. Kids just call me Mr. D." "Nice to meet you," she replied, shaking my hand. "I'm Mary Jones. I remember seeing you at the gym last Thursday. You were with your wife, Terry. Sorry she seemed in such a hurry to leave. It looked like Mr. Bont's absence threw everything off." The moment she said his name, her entire demeanor shifted. She paled, her hands trembled, and she stammered, well, Mr. D, see you later," before practically fleeing the parking lot. That sealed it. Bont wasn't just a trainer. He was a serial predator in our community.
Update 3. It was time to think about my future, and in that vision there was no Terry. Rage gave me clarity. I began reviewing all the small but crucial details of our shared life, the sort of things couples often overlook. Who pays which bills? Which insurance company do we use? When are utilities due? From which account do we make automatic payments? I discovered the mortgage had only a small balance left. My retirement account had grown to an impressive $900,000 thanks to mandatory contributions from our teachers' union. Our savings account, intended for an overseas vacation, held about $30,000. That trip was no longer on the table. My priority became draining it before Terry realized I knew about her betrayal. Quietly, I engineered a series of appliance breakdowns while she wasn't home. I'd unplug a cord, then claim a repairman had come to fix it, paying in cash. In reality, I pocketed the money and repaired it myself. Over time, I gathered nearly $20,000 this way. I also purchased tools and other necessities to prepare for what was coming. Update 4. I always paid cash for everything, showing the receipts to Terry, then secretly returning the items the next day. Dishonest? Absolutely. But honesty and trust had already been gutted from our marriage. Because of her actions, I was becoming a man I never thought I could be, a liar. Her Thursday daytime workouts with Bonte continued, and I no longer bothered even trying to initiate anything intimate with her. We coexisted like roommates. That was it. Quietly, I began boxing up my personal belongings, keeping them stored in the garage where Terry rarely went. Since her car usually sat outside, the garage was basically my territory, and she didn't notice my gradual disappearance. On the rare occasion she did ask about missing items, I told her they'd broken or that I didn't need them anymore. She accepted those answers, mostly because many of my things didn't fit her preferred aesthetic anyway. When most of my possessions were gone and the house looked practically unchanged, I realized how much I'd already surrendered to Terry's control over the years. I withdrew what I could from my retirement account and bought a small house on the edge of town. It wasn't much, just 2 bedrooms, a tiny yard, and a garage, but it was mine, close to the school where I worked, and best of all, the mortgage was small enough that half my salary easily covered the payments. No mansion, no luxury, but solid. Amazing what you can find if you're willing to skip the glossy neighborhoods. I moved my belongings in piece by piece. Furniture wasn't a problem. Secondhand shops and donation centers were full of cheap finds. Honestly, the place reflected my own state, used but still standing. It was time for everyone to get what they deserved. One afternoon at school pickup, Mary Jones came over to me again. Her son Timothy was playing nearby, but I immediately noticed she looked shaken, as if she had been crying. As a teacher, you get trained to read those signs. "Mr. D, can I talk to you for a minute?" she asked, her voice wavering. "Of course. Just park over there and meet me at the benches." I always joked that those benches near the pickup zone were my office. She parked, then joined me while Timothy kicked a ball around. She hesitated, then finally began. "I don't know how much you know about what's been happening at the gym." I kept my face steady. "I know Terry, my wife, enjoys it there, says it keeps her in shape." She bit her lip, clearly wrestling with herself. Then she blurted out, "There are things you need to know." I cut to the chase. "Does this have to do with Philip Bonte?" Her expression hardened instantly. "You have no idea just how much it has to do with that pig." "I can imagine," I replied carefully, "but go on." Tears welled in her eyes. "It targets women at the gym, regulars. He watches, waits, and then pounces." I asked how she knew. She looked away, ashamed. "Because I was one of them, until last month. We met every Friday at 12:30. Her voice faltered as though reliving it. She confessed how she had believed there could be a future with him. Divorced, lonely, missing intimacy, Bonte had filled a void, until suddenly another woman replaced her. He dropped her cold with nothing but a half-hearted, "Sorry, can't anymore." She gave a bitter laugh through tears. "I thought I was special. Turns out I was just another notch." I sat stunned. How could she unload this on me, her child's teacher? She must have been truly desperate. Trying to offer some comfort, I murmured, "Relationships aren't always what they seem." Her eyes narrowed, searching my face. Then she whispered, "You already know, don't you, about him and Terry?" I swallowed hard. "Yes, I know." Mary reached for my arm. "Then please believe me, he'll keep doing this until someone stops him. He doesn't care who he hurts, as long as his ego's fed. He even brags about it at bars with his buddies." Her tone sharpened. "If you need my help to make him pay, just say the word. That man deserves to be brought down." She called for Timothy and drove off, leaving me in silence.
I sat there, mind racing. Oddly, I felt a flicker of relief. Her confession made my plan for revenge seem less like an act of a betrayed husband and more like a moral obligation. Bonte wasn't just wrecking my life, he was a predator preying on countless women. The question now was, how many more? I started piecing together his schedule. The gym was open every day except Mondays, and he seemed to be there constantly. Using the number listed at the gym, I tracked down his address, just 3 blocks from our house. No wonder it was so easy for him to sneak over for sessions with my wife. I told Terry that my doctor had recommended daily evening walks around 5 p.m. Luckily, she showed no interest in joining me. That gave me the perfect cover. Since I knew it wouldn't interfere with her own meetings, everything went smoothly. During my first evening walk, I headed straight to Bonte's address and discovered that he lived in a ground-floor apartment among several similar buildings. His car wasn't there, so I lingered nearby to catch his return. He usually left our house well before 6 p.m., which meant he almost always came back around that time. Sure enough, at exactly 6 p.m., he walked into his apartment. It became a routine, day after day, whenever I was free to go out. On days I had staff meetings and couldn't leave, I assumed he still followed the same pattern. I began to suspect that his evenings at the gym weren't really about exercise, but about meeting different women. To confirm this, I adjusted my schedule, starting my walks earlier and watching his daily movements more closely. Eventually, I decided to take a full week off from work just to investigate. I went to an electronics store and purchased surveillance equipment, a long-range listening device, motion-triggered HD cameras with audio, and an external hard drive for storage. On Monday, after setting everything up, I installed the first camera inside Bonte's apartment. Luckily, his place was small, almost like a studio with a kitchenette and dining space. One camera was enough to cover the entire living area, except the bedroom. Breaking in was shockingly easy. He hid his keys under the doormat. Careless. All I had to do was wait for him to head to the gym, slip inside, place the camera, and leave. From then on, every sound or movement in Bonte's apartment was recorded and streamed straight to my laptop, time-stamped and secure. That same evening, I got my first footage, Bonte eating takeout in front of the TV before heading to bed at 9 p.m. The next day, I slipped into the gym through the back entrance after closing time and set up a second camera in a private room where clients were usually assessed. This was the same room Bonte often used for one-on-one sessions. By Wednesday, when Terry went out shopping, I had already installed the third and fourth cameras, one in our bedroom and another in the living room. Reviewing Tuesday's recordings shocked me, though deep down I wasn't surprised. Bonte woke up, went out for breakfast, then came back and made a phone call. "Julie, hey, it's me. He's gone. See you at 12:30. Wear what I told you. Don't worry, I'll be careful. No one will see me come over. You said he's out for 3 days? Perfect. I'll come Thursday and Friday too. We'll talk later. Love you." He hung up with a spring in his step, practically glowing. On Thursday, I set up in the garage with my laptop, waiting. As expected, the camera caught him returning with breakfast again, then calling Terry. She answered, "Good thing my husband left for work. See you at 12:30 like always." That was the breaking point. Later, I asked Mary, Terry's mother, to help me compile a list of all the women Bonte had been involved with in the past. She attacked the task with energy, and within a week,
I had names and addresses. To my horror, Terry's name was on that list too. At this point, our house meant nothing to me. It wasn't a home anymore, just a building. Terry noticed the emptiness, but I brushed it off, saying I was reorganizing my things. Meanwhile, I secretly prepared for the end. I met with a divorce attorney, set up new bank accounts and insurance under my name only, moved our vacation savings to my private account, and switched to a new SIM card. I even changed the beneficiaries of my retirement plan to our children. I gathered all the evidence, surveillance footage, phone transcripts, photographs. I placed it all in folders along with the names and contact details of the women Bonte had been with. I even included the address of a local clinic for STD testing, since most of his affairs were unprotected. On our kitchen table, I left divorce papers, DVDs of their encounters, printed stills, and my wedding ring, cut in half and smeared with grime. Beside it was a note. Terry, this ruined ring is what's left of our marriage. Do not contact me. If you must, do it through the attorney listed in the documents. I've requested a restraining order at the school, so do not come there. Any disturbance will result in immediate police intervention. Our children know the truth, so don't expect to rewrite the story. Then I left. In the weeks that followed, everything fell apart for them. Word of the scandal spread quickly. The gym owner was forced to shut down and leave town. Bonte was later found beaten in an alley downtown. Divorce filings surged in our area, and several houses went up for sale. Terry came home that day, found my farewell package, and fainted on the spot. A neighbor called an ambulance. She later tried to contact me, but I ignored every attempt. Eventually, she even stormed the school, which ended in her arrest. After that, her efforts stopped. Our children didn't hold back. They confronted her openly, disgusted by her betrayal. Thankfully, they had inherited stronger values from me, not her. The divorce went through and financial matters were settled. Terry had to sell the house and move into a smaller place on the outskirts of town. By then, she was known around the community as the gym slut. Every time she went out, whispers and mocking glances followed. Shame and depression eventually pushed her into psychiatric care. As for me, I kept teaching, rebuilt my life, and now live peacefully in my new home.
Dad gave me the best 18th birthday gift, but my jealous stepmom and her daughter burned my passport a day before the trip. Hi everyone, I turned 18 just a few days ago, and for my birthday, my dad surprised me with something incredible, my very first international trip to India, just the two of us. This trip was supposed to be something really special for so many reasons. My mom passed away when I was only 6. To cope with the loss, my dad and I used to watch Indian movies together all the time. They were colorful, uplifting, and helped brighten even the darkest days. That's how I fell in love with Indian culture. My mom loved those films too. She even had a collection of traditional Indian outfits, even though she never actually got to visit India herself. Before she died, she and my dad promised we'd go there as a family one day. Sadly, she passed away from a sudden brain aneurysm in her sleep before we could make that dream come true. She was only 32. After her death, it was just me and Dad. Watching movies together became our little ritual to keep her memory alive and stay close. Over the years, it made our bond stronger than ever. I know Mom would be proud of us today. That's why India has always held such a deep emotional meaning for both of us. It's not just a trip, it's a promise finally coming true. When Dad revealed at my birthday party that he'd booked the trip, I was ecstatic. I couldn't stop smiling. But not everyone was happy for me. My stepmom, Susan, and her daughter, Nadia, 17, looked like someone had slapped them. And sure enough, after the guests left, I overheard them arguing with my dad. From what I caught, Susan thought he should have postponed the trip so we could all go as a family. Honestly, I was relieved that it would just be the two of us. I don't get along with Susan or Nadia at all, and past family vacations with them were a nightmare. I couldn't imagine them ruining this one too, especially since it meant so much to me emotionally. Luckily, they had their own reasons not to join anyway. Nadia had her final exams and upcoming graduation, and Susan was tied up with an important project at work. Still, I can't help but feel Dad timed things perfectly so it could be just us, even if he'll never admit it.
Susan and Nadia came into my life about 5 years ago. At first, everything seemed fine. They acted friendly enough when Dad was just dating Susan. But once he married her 2 years ago, things shifted. Their attitude toward me became cold and strange for no reason I could figure out. I hadn't done anything differently, yet suddenly I was treated like an outsider in my own home. And now, well, let's just say their jealousy hit a whole new level. Things were already bad with my stepmom and stepsister, but what they did before my trip crossed every line. I was never close with Susan or Nadia, but at least in the beginning our relationship was civil and polite. That all changed after Dad married Susan. Suddenly, she started treating me like dirt, and Nadia copied every move her mother made. They'd talk down to me, make nasty little remarks, and act cruel, but only when Dad wasn't around. The moment he walked into the room, they'd flip the switch and turn into sweet, smiling angels. It was so fake it made my skin crawl. Eventually, I realized I needed to tell Dad what was going on. We sat down for a family talk, and at first, Susan and Nadia denied everything. Luckily, I had recorded one of our earlier conversations where they were openly horrible to me. With evidence on the table, they couldn't lie anymore. So instead of denying, they switched to emotional manipulation. They both burst into tears and told Dad they only acted that way because they felt like I hadn't accepted them as family, which was total nonsense. I did see them as family. It was them who treated me like garbage. Yet somehow they expected me to keep being nice to them while they showed me zero respect. Dad was confused and torn. Susan was the first woman he'd really cared for since Mom, and I knew he didn't want to lose that relationship so easily. He asked all of us to try harder to get along. For his sake, I agreed to keep things civil. After that, their behavior shifted again. Instead of being nice in front of Dad and cruel behind his back, they just chose to completely ignore me whenever he wasn't around. It was like I didn't exist. Honestly, I preferred it that way. At least they weren't actively tormenting me. For Dad's sake, we kept up the performance of being one happy family, and that carried on for about a year. Fast forward to just a few days ago, the morning after my birthday, Dad and I had breakfast together and I pulled him aside. I asked him straight out if Susan and Nadia were upset about not joining us on the India trip. He admitted they were, but also reminded me how much this trip meant to us, especially with it falling so close to Mom's death anniversary. He wanted this to be our special time together, just father and daughter. He promised he'd smooth things over with them later. That was fine by me. Honestly, vacations with Susan and Nadia were torture. Dad and I are explorers. We love walking around, sightseeing, soaking up every bit of culture. They, on the other hand, prefer to sit in the hotel and complain if we're even a little late for dinner. To me, that's not a vacation. That's being trapped. India was supposed to be different. India was supposed to be ours. I didn't think there was anything wrong with that, especially since Susan and Nadia had taken their own little trips together in the past without us. The only real difference was that ours was longer and farther away, 10 days overseas instead of just a weekend somewhere nearby. But still, it felt completely fair. Dad told me not to stress, to focus on packing and getting ready. He promised he'd deal with Susan and Nadia after we got back. So I did exactly that. For the past 2 days, I was walking on air, too excited to care about their drama. Yesterday, I finished packing everything, double-checked my documents, and tucked my passport into my bag so it would be ready. Our flight was scheduled today. But now, I don't even know if we're going anymore, because Susan and Nadia crossed a line so insane I still can't believe it. They burned my passport. Yes, burned it. Not lost, not misplaced. They literally destroyed it. I found out just a few hours ago. It was around 6 p.m. yesterday when I was organizing paperwork and noticed it was missing from my bag. By 2 a.m., the truth came out. They had actually set it on fire. They burned my passport before my trip. My dad's revenge was brutal. When I went through my bag to double-check everything before our flight, I realized my passport wasn't there. At first, I thought maybe I misplaced it, so I tore the entire house apart. Drawers, shelves, even the laundry baskets. 45 minutes later, I was sweating, panicking, and close to tears. It was just gone. That's when Susan and Nadia waltzed into my room with these fake sweet voices and asked, "Lose something?" I immediately felt something was off, but in desperation, I admitted I couldn't find my passport anywhere.
That's when Susan tossed something on my bed. It was my passport, or at least what was left of it. Half burned, charred along the edges, completely ruined. She smirked and asked, "Was this what you were looking for?" I froze. My brain couldn't even process it at first. When the shock finally wore off, I decided I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of watching me break down. I calmly set the ruined passport aside, stood up, shut the door in their faces, rocked it, and then I collapsed into tears. Dad wasn't home. He was out picking up clothes for the trip. I texted him everything that happened, even attached a photo of the burned passport. Within 20 minutes, I heard him storming into the house. His voice shook the walls as he screamed at Susan and Nadia, calling them picos, and ordered them out. He said he'd already made one mistake when he ignored the first time they mistreated me, and he wasn't about to repeat it just because he once loved Susan. Of course, they immediately tried to fake cry and blame me. Their story was that I'd supposedly left a lit cigarette on my dresser, and that's how my passport caught fire. Which is insane. I don't even smoke. At that point, I came downstairs because I couldn't let them spin lies like that. Dad looked at me and said I was just in time because he had something planned. I assumed he was about to call the police, but no, he went into his office and came back with a stack of papers. Nadia's face went pale the second she saw them. Then, without saying a word, Dad ripped the documents in half right in front of Susan.
Turns out those papers were for Nadia's student loan. She needed Dad to co-sign so she could pay for college, since Susan hadn't saved a dime for her. Dad had been ready to help. Not anymore. That was his revenge. My passport for her college dream. Fair trade, honestly. Within an hour, Susan and Nadia were gone. They begged, pleaded, even got on their knees, but Dad didn't budge. Now, since the moment they left, they've been spamming me with texts, Nadia especially. She keeps begging me to convince Dad to reconsider, promising she'll do anything to make up for it. She claims they never knew Dad was going to co-sign her loan, and that they just lashed out because they felt excluded. I finally replied once. I reminded them that they've gone on plenty of mother-daughter trips without us, so why is it unfair when Dad and I wanted one trip alone? Especially for my 18th birthday and in memory of my late mom. The truth is, Nadia still has her biological dad, even if he lives in another state and doesn't have custody. She still sees him sometimes. Me? My mom has been gone for years. That trip was supposed to be in her honor, and Susan and Nadia couldn't even let me have that. So no, I don't feel bad. What happened to Nadia was karma. Burning my passport was cruel. Losing Dad's support for her education, that was justice. Update. And now, honestly, Nadia has lost every right to ask me for anything, not even forgiveness. Still, she keeps messaging me, begging. I even tried blocking her, but for some reason I hesitated. Maybe because part of me wondered if it was a little unfair to plan a trip just for me and Dad, leaving her and Susan behind. Their getaways usually last only 2 to 3 days, somewhere nearby, while ours was supposed to be 10 full days in India. That's a big difference. So here I am, asking, am I really the bad guy for wanting one international trip with my dad without my stepmother and stepsister? Well, before I continue, I'll just say what I think the answer is. No, not at all. This situation seems clear. I wasn't wrong. I wanted time with my dad, especially on my 18th birthday, and especially since it was in honor of my late mom. What Susan and Nadia did was cruel and manipulative, and it says more about them than about me. My dad, he's the one I feel bad for. He fell for a woman who clearly didn't respect me, and by extension, didn't really love him the way she should have. Update. A lot of people asked why we didn't call the cops after they destroyed my passport. The truth? It didn't even cross my mind at first. I was in shock, panicking, crying, and honestly, what would it have done? They would have just claimed it was an accident, dragged it out forever, and nothing would change. We didn't want that mess. Others also asked why I wasn't in college yet. I graduated high school last year and decided to take a gap year to figure myself out. I worked a few jobs, interned in journalism, and gained some experience in the field I want to study. Now I'm applying to schools, and luckily my grandparents have already promised to cover my tuition, so my dad doesn't have to stress about me. Nadia's situation was completely different, which is why Dad was planning to co-sign her student loan. But after what happened, well, you already know how that ended. As for our trip, today was supposed to be our flight to India. Instead, we stayed home and watched old movies we used to love. It wasn't the same, but honestly, it helped. I finally blocked both Susan and Nadia, and I don't regret it. They don't deserve my sympathy. You were all right. I was only second-guessing myself because I've been missing my mom and was in a very emotional state. But they betrayed me for no reason, and whatever happens to them now, they absolutely brought on themselves. Update. It's been 4 days since my last post, and today Dad came home from work with big news. He filed divorce. Afterward, we finally had the conversation we'd been avoiding for far too long. He admitted that he'd been selfish. He loved Susan and tried to convince himself it would work out, even when her behavior, and Nadia's, clearly proved otherwise. Instead of trying to repair things with me, they simply shut me out completely. That's not family. That's not love. Dad told me he finally realized he'd been clinging to something toxic, and it was damaging both of us. He deserved better. I deserved better. Maybe he did love her, but it was obvious she didn't love him enough to even tolerate me, and that's not the kind of woman he should spend his life with. Update. The reason Susan never truly accepted me was simple. She could never see me as part of her family. Deep down, she probably knew that for Dad, I would always come first, and that neither she nor Nadia could ever replace me. That jealousy and insecurity made her bitter, and eventually it poisoned everything. Dad may never fully understand why their behavior shifted so dramatically, because before the wedding, they treated me kindly, but the moment the vows were said, it was like they became different people overnight. Dad admitted he ignored the signs, hoping things would somehow settle, but the damage was already done. He told me he's finished pretending. We're not a happy family, and there's no point in acting like one. That same day, after meeting with his lawyer, he filed for divorce. Later, he apologized for everything I had to endure because of his choices, and we just hugged. Some might call him a flawed father, but to me, he's the best dad I could ever ask for. Sure, he made mistakes and sometimes thought only of himself, but every mistake was outweighed by 10 good things he did for me. I love him, and I always will. Update. A few days later, it became official. Susan was served divorce papers. Dad came home early from work and locked himself in his office. I could hear him shouting into the phone, and it had me worried. Hours later, he finally explained. Susan had called, threatening to ruin him if he went through with the divorce. She promised to spread lies, throw accusations, and destroy his reputation. The first time, she caught him off guard at work, but once he was home, he recorded the call. When she realized he had proof, she flipped out, accused him of blackmail, and turned the whole thing into chaos. Dad didn't back down. He told her if she tried to drag his name through the mud, he'd make sure she'd regret it. From her voice, he could tell she was shaken. He said the process will start soon, and once it's finalized, he and I will finally take that trip to India together. He promised me. For now, we just hope she doesn't create more problems, but honestly, with the evidence I have, including the destroyed passport, she knows she's fighting a losing battle. Update. Hi again, quick update because I'm super busy. The divorce is officially finalized, and the outcome? Honestly, Dad hit the jackpot. Susan walked away with nothing. No alimony, no settlement, no ridiculous child support she tried to claim out of nowhere. She fought dirty, but it didn't work. So now it's just us. We kept everything, and for the first time in a long time, life feels calm. I already have my new passport, and Dad and I have started planning our India trip again. This time, it's really happening. I can't even describe how excited I am. More importantly, I'm genuinely happy now. Thank you all for your support along the way. I'm refusing to go on a family vacation because my sister expects me to look after her kids again. I even had to move out of my parents' house earlier because I was constantly being pulled into babysitting my 3 nieces and nephews. Despite that, last year I still ended up acting like a helper, or even the main nanny during our family trip. For example, last summer we went to the beach. My parents paid for my hotel, but I had to share a room with 3 loud boys because my sister and her husband wanted their own space. I was promised I'd have time for myself, but instead I spent almost all my free time taking care of the kids. When I complained, everyone reminded me that I wasn't paying for the trip. In the end, we only did one thing I actually wanted, visiting an art gallery. I enjoy that kind of thing on vacation, but the kids were bored. This year, my parents planned another similar trip in June and expected everything to be the same. I refused. I told them I would drive separately and pay for my own hotel so I could have my own space. They were surprised and brought up the cost, but I explained that I have a stable job and can afford it. That led to arguments, but I explained my reasons clearly. I want to enjoy a vacation like an adult, not spend it like a babysitter. My parents told my sister, and she immediately called me, yelling that I would ruin everything if I didn't help her with the kids. I finally snapped and reminded her how last year I was dragged into her chaos, barely able to do anything for myself, and even made to feel guilty for wanting something simple like visiting an art gallery. I told her I deserve a proper vacation too. Now she refuses to talk to me, and my parents are still trying to convince me to go along just to avoid conflict. I'm standing my ground, even though the pressure is growing. I understand it won't be easy for them without help, but I don't think I'm wrong for setting boundaries. Let me know what you think. Am I right, or is my sister justified since she has 3 kids to take care of? Update 1. About an hour after I posted, my sister somehow found it. She wasn't just angry at me, she was upset that people in the comments didn't support her. She had a meltdown talking about how hard it is to raise triplets and insisting that I, as someone young and independent, should help her. I didn't change my position, and now I'm expecting a call from my parents since she already reached out to them. Update 2. After work, I can add more details. Things have mostly settled now. My parents saw my post and were shocked by how many people responded. Yes, they were upset that I posted it, but I told them if they had listened to me earlier, it wouldn't have been necessary. I was tired of always being the one expected to sacrifice for family peace. Eventually, my parents confronted my sister. The trip was canceled anyway since nothing had been booked yet, but now they're arguing with her. She blames me, and the kids are disappointed because they won't go to the beach. She even called me during lunch and implied that I don't have my own life, so I should help her. I recorded that conversation and showed it to my parents, which made them even more upset with her. A few days later, they told me they would never force me to babysit again and admitted that last year's situation was unfair. Now they're angry at my sister for saying I should help just because I have no life. Meanwhile, her husband has stepped back from the chaos and spends most of his time at work. Update 3. My parents have apologized, but my sister hasn't yet. At least as of a week ago, she refused. This whole situation basically exposed deeper issues in our family. For context, my parents and sister got used to me helping with her triplets. I lived with my parents until I was 22 to save money during college. I had a scholarship, but staying at home made things easier, and I'm grateful for that. But after graduating, everyone assumed I had unlimited free time. That's when they convinced me to go on that family trip. During that trip, I was responsible for 3 6-year-old boys and even had to share a room with them. They didn't listen to me at all. I even had to call their mom multiple times just to get them to behave. Yet, whenever I wanted to do something for myself, I was treated like the problem. If my plans didn't match the rest of the family, they were ignored. It felt completely unfair. I was part of the family, but my opinion didn't matter. After that trip, I spoke honestly with my parents, and they admitted they were wrong. By the end of the summer, I moved out without telling anyone in advance. I had already secured a good job after an internship, and moving closer to work reduced my commute significantly. My sister was especially unhappy because she lost her regular free babysitter, but she still tried to pressure me into helping. Sometimes I gave in when she offered things like pizza, and it became expected. When my parents suggested another trip to the same place, I immediately recognized it would be the same situation again. If I accepted their offer to pay, I'd be stuck babysitting. So I told them calmly I would go independently and pay for myself. That's when everything escalated. My parents started pleading, and my sister tried to pressure me emotionally, but I refused. After I posted about it, my family initially turned against me. My parents even called me while reading my post. I asked them if anything I wrote was untrue. They tried to say it was exaggerated, but I pointed out specific details that proved otherwise. I told them to look at the comments, even though there were too many to read fully. The number kept growing quickly, which shocked them and made them reconsider their actions. My sister also tried calling me repeatedly during work. I finally answered at lunch. She complained that my post turned her parents against me. After their argument, my parents canceled the trip. At first, they tried to blame me for it, but later they admitted their mistake. They acknowledged it wasn't fair to treat me like free childcare, especially since I no longer lived with them. They also tried to justify things by reminding me I lived with them for free during college, but I pointed out that wasn't a valid argument. When my sister finally spoke to me, she revealed her mindset clearly, saying I had no life and should spend my weekends helping her because she was too tired to manage everything. She's a stay-at-home mom, her husband earns well, and they live comfortably, but her kids are not my responsibility. She got angry and hung up. I had recorded the call and later showed it to my parents, which made them even more upset with her. A few days later, her husband stepped in and made her apologize. It was clear he hadn't realized the full situation before. He even believed she had been paying me for babysitting after I moved out. In reality, she barely covered anything, sometimes just gave money for pizza. It turned out she hadn't paid me properly for months. When this came up, her husband was furious, and she had to pay me everything she owed from her savings. After that, he apologized to me for not stepping in earlier and said they would hire a proper babysitter from now on.
A few days later, we had a family meeting at my parents' house. Everyone apologized to me again. After that, my parents confirmed that the family vacation was still happening. And yes, I'm still going on my own terms, driving separately and paying for my own hotel room. I made it clear that if my sister even tries to push childcare onto me again, I'll switch hotels. I told her directly, and she promised it wouldn't happen. So, if there's no update a month after the trip, it means everything went fine. Update 4. My sister called me demanding that I delete my posts. She had realized how widely the story had spread and couldn't handle the backlash anymore. She asked if people were still commenting, and I told her honestly, yes, around 10 new comments a day, and most of them are criticizing her. She broke down crying and begged me to take everything down. I refused. I told her those posts are the only reason she can't treat me like garbage anymore. She acted like my entire life should revolve around hers. She didn't even properly pay me for babysitting, kept money for herself, and turned me into a full-time nanny during last year's vacation. It's no surprise people reacted negatively. When I mentioned I had even made a video about the situation, she completely lost it and hung up. Later, my parents called, asking me to delete the posts too. I refused again and explained that none of this would have happened if they had supported me earlier. I told them clearly, I'm not her servant, nanny, or handyman. I'm her brother, and I'm an adult. Eventually, they backed off, but still asked me to remove everything. I told them I wouldn't unless they started standing up for me more often. My sister created this situation with her entitlement, and now she has to deal with it. I also made it clear I have my own life, my career, and I want to move forward. If they keep enabling her, it will only make things worse. The only way to stop this is to end the entire situation. My posts are anonymous, and I have every right to speak about what happened. My mom ended up crying, my dad stayed quiet, and I told them their emotions wouldn't change my decision. They know what needs to be done. Stop supporting her behavior. Soon after, my sister called again, furious because our parents told her they wouldn't step in anymore and that she had to handle things herself. They also told her to treat me better. I responded sarcastically, and when I hung up, she was crying again.
Later, her husband called me to hear my side. He wasn't happy that I kept posting, but after I explained everything, he said he would talk to her again. Hopefully, that would calm things down. The vacation was still planned for the end of June. I had already booked my room on a completely different floor, far from my family. I made it clear, unless it was a planned family activity, I would spend my time however I wanted, visiting galleries, trying local food, and actually enjoying myself. The trip itself had ups and downs. The good part, my parents no longer tried to push me into babysitting. My sister did try, though. She even attempted to find out which room I was staying in, but failed. Before arriving, I had already informed the hotel staff not to give out any information about me. They confirmed it. At the day of departure, I left earlier than everyone else. I knew they wouldn't be ready on time, so I left at 9 a.m., even though check-in was later. My parents were annoyed because they had planned a group breakfast, but I told them I hadn't been informed. At the hotel, I double-checked with the staff about my privacy. Later, I found out my family had indeed tried to get my room number, but the staff refused. My sister tried to pressure them, but her husband stopped her. When we met later, everything seemed normal. At one point during an outing, my sister asked me to watch the kids. I immediately refused. I knew her trick. Just a minute would turn into an hour. Her husband backed me up and told her to stop. She started crying, saying she needed a break, but he reminded her he was tired too. My mom gave me a look, so I went up to her and said clearly if she expected me to babysit, I would leave the vacation immediately. That ended the discussion. After that, neither my mom nor my sister tried again. At the hotel, I avoided sharing elevators and kept distance. My room was far away, and I made sure no one followed me. The next day, I spent most of my time alone, only joining them for specific plans, like visiting the aquarium. Everything stayed calm. Later, my sister confronted me, saying I had ruined her vacation because now she still had to deal with her kids. I told her directly, I'm not her solution anymore, and she needs to handle her own life. She followed me, yelling, but I ignored her. At dinner, I told everyone she had been trying to track me down. She got scolded like a child. I made it clear those days were over. By the last day, everything was peaceful. No pressure, no manipulation. I still spend some time with my nephews. I'm not heartless. I even bought them small souvenirs. Overall, I consider the trip a success. My family finally understood that I'm not someone they can use anymore. Update 6. My mom and my sister saw my latest post and completely lost it again. My sister called, crying, saying I made her look like a bad mother. I told her if the behavior fits, then that's the reality. She couldn't point out anything false in my story. Then my mom came to my house demanding I delete everything. I refused again. She left in tears. Later, I spoke with my parents and I told them clearly their behavior created this situation. I'm not going back to how things were. They told my sister to leave me alone. She threw another tantrum, but her husband stepped in. My parents now insist she needs therapy. Update 7. I had a long conversation with my parents, and we agreed to keep some distance for now. I also spoke with my brother-in-law, and we settled things. He admitted the situation went too far and said my sister needs professional help. They're now looking for a therapist. He also apologized for not stepping in earlier and said they've already hired a proper babysitter. We both agreed it was a difficult situation that needed to end. And one last thing, thanks to all this, I actually started dating. A girl I liked recognized my story and had been waiting for me to make a move. Today is our first date. This is the final update.